and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 18th, 2013 special meeting of the Board of Commissioners. We have a short agenda tonight. Doesn't mean we'll have a short meeting, but we have a short agenda. And we don't have public comment, although I will invite public comment for anybody who's not able to stay. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about a new policy, which isn't really a policy. At our last meeting, as you all know, we were here till after 1 o'clock in the morning. And we have thought long and hard about how we can control that a little bit. We have a lot of really important issues in front of us right now that we encourage and want a lot of public participation on. We are going to ask that people try to keep their comments to 5 minutes. Now, this is a soft limit, and I'm not going to cut you off after 5 minutes. But in consideration of all the other people who want to speak, and in consideration of everyone's time, and respect for people's time, we're going to ask that we try to keep our comments to 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, I will not cut you off, but I will gently remind you that it's been 5 minutes, and it would be nice to wrap up. Now, if you have a presentation or a PowerPoint or boards that you'd like to share that you've put together that will take more than 5 minutes, that's fine. And if it's going to be more than 10 minutes, we'd ask that you notify us ahead of time so that we can plan the whole agenda accordingly. And we will be very generous with leeway there. But I think it'll be in everyone's best interest if we all try. And I think this board, the members of this board themselves have been pretty good about keeping their comments to about 5 minutes. So that's going to be our goal, to do the soft 5-minute rule. And I, again, will not cut anyone off, but I will remind you when it's turning to be around 5 minutes and ask you if you could try to gather your thoughts and finish up. All right, so with that, if anybody has to leave the meeting early and would like to come up first for some public comment, I invite you to do so. And I don't see anyone coming up, so I will go ahead and announce that we had an executive session immediately preceding this meeting, at which we discussed matters of personnel, litigation, and real estate. And now we have our first item, which is a motion, if someone could make a motion to authorize free parking in downtown Wayne in Saturdays in December.
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second, but what about the Bryn Mawr pay lot? There are businesses there, too.
Can add that in, too.
What's not on the agenda? All right.
Okay, is there any other staff comment or commissioner comment?
Sure. Madam President, it's spoken to our parking authority folks. The loss in revenue would be approximately $3,600 for this. As part of what the police have worked on with American Express, in which they will be giving the township $2,000. So that it brings that down to about a $1,600 difference. But also, too, is made aware that people will still continue to put quarters in, except for American Express. They're actually going to bag a lot of the meters with their American Express advertising. But during that whole time period there, people will still put quarters in there. As well as we will not have a part-time parking enforcement person working on those Saturdays, so we will not be paying that out as well. So again, this could come down to where approximately maybe it's a $1,000 loss, but our hope is that everybody will be shopping there and spending their dollars, and then we will get that back, actually a portion of that through our business privilege tax. So. And
how are we going to let residents know?
This will be something we'll work with the Wayne Business Association and the business owners up in the Bryn Mawr area to be able to get the word out. And I know with Linda sitting here, I'm sure she will put something out in an article in the newspaper too, as well as this. But also we'll try to do through e-blasts and that out as well to let residents know that this is coming.
Okay. Any other
So
commissioner?
I just heard something I didn't know. You said that the bags over the meters will have an American Express message on them?
Yes.
So they're sponsoring, in essence, they're sponsoring up to $2,000 worth of
just
free
on one
parking.
day. On one day.
Right. Okay.
Is there any other commissioner comment? Any public comment? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, next we are going to have our public hearing number 2 on the 2014 budget. And I'm going to invite our Finance Director, Bill White, to introduce this discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to recap where we're at in the process, the 2014 budget was initially presented to the public and published on the website on October 14th, so it's been out there a little bit over a month. What tonight is another opportunity for folks to come up and make public comment on items that are included in the budget, if they have any. And that would be in advance of us putting the final budget together this week, in advance of next Monday night's regular Board of Commissioners meeting, at which time the 2014 budget ordinance will be introduced, as well as the fee schedule ordinance and some of the other resolutions that are tied to the budget process will be on next Monday's agenda for introduction and then ultimately for adoption in December. So this gives the public one more opportunity to make comment before we finalize or get one step closer to the final numbers for 2014.
Thank you. Do we have any commissioner comments or?
I had two questions. Last year, we had talked about going to leased equipment, and I wanted to make sure this budget reflects that for the expenditures for vehicles and whatnot.
Yeah, within the capital plan in the budget, there are two pieces of equipment in the Public Works Department that we proceeded this year in acquiring through a lease. The 5-year capital plan includes doing that on several other vehicles during that time period, so yes.
And then the second question, when I looked at the 5-year capital budget under sewers, we've talked many times about there are a few streets remaining in town that need sewers, and trying to lay out a plan for that so that the people that live on those streets can make decisions. And when I look at the capital plan, I don't see that in there.
Yeah, actually what you'll see a week from tonight is a little bit of a deviation in the sanitary sewers now. Is a presentation to take 2014 and do a system-wide analysis, not too dissimilar for what we just went through on the stormwater side, to evaluate the overall condition of the program. Initially, what is out in the budget now is an extremely aggressive plan to address a lot of mounting issues on the sanitary sewer side. Rather than charging into it, we've talked internally, and another approach is to do a system-wide analysis in 14 and then put a better plan together over the next, it'll be a lot longer than 5 years, maybe 15 to 20 years. So that can certainly be part of that analysis that we'll talk about doing for next year.
Maybe if I could just add to that, Commissioner, real quickly, is we saw on King of Prussia Road this year, where again, staff had seen that the system was deteriorated, and instead of spending the additional dollars there to fix it once and for all, they ended up stopping short, which then we had that major collapse issue, which again cost us a lot of money. To be able to put a long-range plan, I think, John, this is what you were looking for, is pretty much a plan we can continue to follow. But there's a lot of expenses that are coming at the township because the system is old, and be able to how we're going to plan this, as well as the pumping stations too, the possibility of eliminating some, but also of how we can do this and coordinate with Aqua and Pico too, while roads are being opened up, that we just don't continue to.
Well, the only difference being on new sewers is they're paid for by the homeowners.
Correct.
Or they reimburse the capital expense.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, I'm just going to take advantage of this time to read some of the highlights of the budget. I recognize that staff has produced this incredibly detailed, very transparent, very easy to read budget, but not everyone has time to read 200 pages of township budget. So I'll just read some highlights just to make sure that, and this is for the benefit of those at home, and also those that are sitting here that haven't read the budget. This will be the third year in which the tax millage rate is remaining the same at 3.7511 mils. We're going to emphasize that there's no tax increase this year, and primarily because of the dramatic increase in business privilege tax, and that includes an $8 million settlement that we came into this year. And that $8 million will be divided up to pay down some long-term obligations and liabilities. Speaking of business privilege tax, in 2010, our BPT tax was $5,257,000, and in 2013, it's $9,179,000. So it's quite a bit higher than it was just 3 years ago. And the forecast, it's forecast a little bit lower at $8 million. And the point here is, you know, these levels include large lump sum settlements that we reach due to audits. As far as the settlement allocation, we're allocating, I don't know how this is a percentage basis, but $2.7 million towards the pension. 18%. Is that 18%? 18% increase. Yeah, this is in addition to the other funding that we were doing on the pension, the MMO. And we will set aside $1.1 million for the capital plan. I'm not going to read them all, but stormwater, we have about $1.2 million, and then we're setting aside $1 million towards a software project to bring the accounting and finance department a new system that will greatly enhance their abilities. We're using an older system that's been in place for over 10 years, and it's requiring the finance staff to do hundreds of hours of manual calculations off that system just to put together the budget. So I'm greatly underestimating them. It's thousands of hours, I think, that Bill White spends throughout the year to get this budget. Right, Bill? Well, if you add everyone's time up, it might be. Bill's like me. I always say, I hardly ever work. You know, he's working all the time. And there's an additional $450,000 outlay towards an upgrade to the parking kiosk system, which will also greatly enhance the way we collect and allow patrons to pay their parking fees. Now, the other important piece that I want the public to know about, and it's been said a few times, in 2007 when I joined the Board of Commissioners, we had, just prior to that, in 2006, we had 155 employees. As of 2012, we were down to 118. So we went from 155 down to 118. We've since gone back up to 121. And it's just, you know, I say this every meeting, I feel like, that we continue to do more and more with less and less. And what I'm saying is the demand for resources in the township always goes up. It always goes up. The population's always going up, or has been since I've lived here for 25 years. And yet the number of employees that we employ has gone down. So we continue to ask them to do more and more, and they continue to deliver more and more services and quality of services year over year. So please, you know, if you see a township employee, whether it's the person who's picking up your trash or a police officer or a public works person, thank them, because they really are working harder for us every day. One thing that is facing the township that we've seen and we've realized more dramatically in the last couple years is the pension obligations and the other post-employment benefits. And this is huge, because when I joined the board 6 years ago, I ran on a platform of reducing debt, and our debt at that time was $65 million. What I didn't realize was that we had about another $250 million of liability on the pension and the OPEB. Now, it's important, you know, to be fair, that this pension and OPEB is not $250 million that we owe right now, but over the next 25 to 30 years, this money is due. And this is, excuse me?
It's 50. The actuarial projection is for 50 years.
50 years, thank you. So, are you going to cut me off?
5 minutes apply to the board?
There's the gentle reminder that it's been
Okay.
5 minutes.
Well, I'm wrapping up. But one of the biggest issues, I want to put this out there. I started out by saying that we're seeing no tax increase. But at the same time, the board and staff have fully realized and recognized this incredibly large, long-term liability. And I'm not going to make, this is not a political statement. We will be raising taxes at some point if new revenue streams do not come in. There's just no way to bridge this gap without tax increases. And the escalation of those costs. And Bill White has done a very good job at educating all of us and providing the documentation and the information. And the CBFAC and the CARFAC committees have worked very hard at helping to bring transparency to this issue. So I think I'll leave it at that. If you want to look at all the details of how we get our work done and how all the revenues and all the fees balance out, please take a look at the budget. But many thanks again to Bill White, Bob Tate, all directors, all staff, and Bob Zienkowski for your hard work on this budget. I greatly appreciate the detail and the quality of this report. It's phenomenal. Thank you.
I just have 2 quick points I'd like to make. One is that our finance department masterminds this document, but all of our departments do a significant amount of work putting it, and every single line item has a narrative with it, which takes a long time to put together. And I want to put out there that for us running this board, that is so helpful. We use it all year long. We refer to that information. And it's self-explanatory, and really, this is a document that I bring to every meeting, all year long, and it's a great resource for us. So thank you to all of those directors. The other point I wanted to make was, and I made this last year as well, when you go through this budget kind of line by line, what the projections are. I mean, budgeting is part science, part art, because you have to really project and guess what the future is going to hold, looking back at what it's held in the past. And just a couple of brief percentages. I mean, we have a lot of increases in this budget. We have an 8% increase in the health care costs, 18% in our pension costs. We have a 2.75 wage increase for pretty much everyone except our manager. We have a new $200,000 line item that's been added, so there are a lot of expenses rising. And the revenues, I believe the estimates are pretty conservative about what we're going to be getting in. They're not pie in the sky hopeful that we're going to get a lot of money. The projection for our business privilege tax, which is 40% of our revenues, is only 6% increase, which historically that's actually sort of low. And we actually have a projected decrease in our in the real estate transfer tax. So I feel good in looking at these numbers and projections that they're very conservative, and that we hopefully won't be left holding the bag due to too rosy projections. And I think that's a very smart way to handle it, and I appreciate that we have a staff that looks at it that way. Do we have any other commissioner comment before we go to public comment? No? All right, I'm going to go ahead and invite public comment and questions and anyone who would like to speak to the budget. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Mulray. I'm the director of the Radnor Memorial Library, and I'm just here to say thank you to the Board of Commissioners and to Bill and to Bob. We appreciate very much your ongoing support, and we very much thank you for the 2.5% increase that we see in this year's budget. That will assist us, obviously, in meeting our increased costs to continue to provide excellent library services to this township. So I'm not going to use anywhere close to my 5 minutes. I just want to say thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else want to comment on the budget?
Philip Wilson, 661 Church Road. Wayne, good evening, or good afternoon. I didn't know, I really wasn't planning to come on up and say anything, but I did want to ask and follow up to essentially a request or an idea that I put forth last meeting, and that was to have the Ardrossan purchase proposal put into the budget, and I'm not sure how the process works. But as a resident and a taxpayer, I'd like to see the impact of what the proposed purchase would be as it's proposed, because I know there's a millage increase, but I also know there's a millage increase for the OPEB costs coming down the road. So we do have a 5-year forecast in the budget, correct, for what we think the future is going to hold and how revenues are going to come in and how the taxes are going to increase or our costs. And if I remember correctly, within the budget, today's budget, I believe $10 million of the $42 million budget, and those numbers may be incorrect. I think the 10 million is right. But overall, we spend about $42 million a year. 10 million of that is essentially debt and or liabilities. So we got a smaller pie. So I want to make sure that, to what you just said, Elaine, I hope we don't have a rosy picture, too rosy of a picture, because not too many years ago, we just went through the Great Recession. We could sit here and debate all night about where the economy is going or where it's been, how strong it is, how healthy we are. But I really do advocate, if not for this process this year, that next year we really do look at more sensitivity analysis in terms of what the business privilege tax, that 6% increase, is that reasonable? And if we varied that, what really would it do to our services? Because when we talk about taking out $10 million out of a $42 million budget, and am I using a right number?
It's 32, but
32 million?
32, yeah.
So it's 10 million of 32 million.
yeah, I can't quickly confirm the 10 million. That sounds about right, but the 32.
Okay, so it's about a third of the budget is essentially a sunk cost or a liability or a debt that we carry. So we have a smaller portion of the pie for our services. And John, you bring this up all the time. We're doing more with less. Well, as every community is happening, that pie for actual services is getting smaller and smaller. So we are even more susceptible to changes in how much revenue we're going to bring in. So if there's a good variability in that, and what I really like about the budget is with OPIP, you worked through CARFAC and you came together and came with a consensus as to how we're going to handle the liabilities going forward. So if I can only advocate one thing is, if we don't do it today, for the next meeting, we have the administration look at what the Ardrossan cost is as it's proposed and layered into the budget. Is that possible? Is that going to happen?
Bill, do you have plans on adjusting the forecast for any of the contingencies that we have going right now?
Yes, yeah, as part of the Phase 2 work on the open space policy, we'll have a better understanding of what those costs are. And to be perfectly honest, the revenue numbers from the development side of that project. So all of that will find its way into the forecast. And then just real quick, with regard to the sensitivity analysis, a lot of that does exist now in terms of the major levers that impact our operating activity. It doesn't make its way into the final budget because then, just as a matter of presentation, we can run as many different scenarios as we want through the spreadsheets that we've created. And we do that internally, and we do that through the evaluation process. And ultimately, what ends up making it out in front of the board and the public is the one that we vetted through the administration and through CARFAC, and the one that everyone generally feels comfortable with. But maybe not a bad idea at a future year that we have one budget hearing dedicated towards playing with some of those live that we could take a look at.
Well, and to that point, you did that all through the education process of OPIP and OPEB, and that was really helpful to understand what the variations could do to essentially how much a resident will have to contribute to that. And, you know, knowledge is great, and then we can make, I find the budget conversation here to be deafening. You know, it's so robust. That's sarcasm, thank you. And I know you've allocated, exactly. You've allocated 3 meetings to the budget, and I really appreciate that, and it is a good budget. It has a lot of things in it that we've not even talked about. So I think that would raise more questions and get more people involved, maybe 5, involved in the budget process. But there's a lot of good things in there. I mean, there's a line item in there that says we spend $2 million a year in parks and rec maintenance. That's a big number. I don't know what we spend that for. Is that to cut the grass? Is that to cut the trees all up and down the trail? I mean, that's a big number. And then when we were looking at 32 million of monies that are variable money spent, is my 5 minutes up? Yeah, okay.
I'm cutting you a little slack because
I'm gonna be
Bill
done.
took some of your time.
Yeah, Bill. So those things will all come out, I think, in better conversations with more information and trying to make it a community budget rather
Make it
than.
more like a workshop than a presentation.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on the budget? Good evening.
Rich Booker, Belrose Lane. I have a question just on that last commentary, Bill. I guess what you're saying is that, and maybe I'm kind of reading more into this, but what I hear you saying is that the Ardrossan purchase has no effect on this budget for this year and therefore is not included? And secondly, are you planning for that contingency now, or are you not planning for the contingency or the Ardrossan purchase? 2 questions.
Okay, so the answer to the first question is the budget was presented a month ago. So the numbers that are out there now did not include the Ardrossan factor because, quite honestly, we didn't know when this was all going to come to light. So based on the information we had when the budget was presented, this had everything in it. So the answer to the second question is yes. As the next iteration of the budget, now that we know the Ardrossan piece has been introduced, we will factor into the forecast in those out years. But as we've talked about briefly in the Ardrossan process, 2014 is going to have limited activity, and most of it is going to impact 15 and beyond. So it'll be more of the forecast than it will be an impact to the 2014 appropriations.
Bill, what about the earnest money, which is $500,000?
Well, I actually have a question for our solicitor on how that needs to be accounted for, but that could be one thing that.
So you don't have an answer yet, but you'll have
Right.
an answer when the time comes.
Yes.
Well, just to follow up on that, it sounds like and here's where I'm going with this. You are planning for Ardrossan to be in the budget, is what you're saying? Now you are. So it sounds like this is a decision that's been made. If it has, I think that the people here will be surprised. But if you're planning for it, it sounds like you've already made the decision. Is that the case?
If I
Can I respond to that?
Just real quickly, there's a lot of items that are identified in the forecast that are assumption-based, and those assumptions are always subject to change. So a year ago, if you took a look at the forecast, there were different assumptions on how we were going to treat pension, OPEB, some ideas on future revenue sources outside of taxes, and some of those were incorporated into the budget, and some of those we decided not to move forward with. So in terms of the forecast itself, those are always assumption-based and are not necessarily things that the board has made a firm decision on.
Okay, do we have any other public comment about the budget?
Hello, Jim Schneller, St. David's. I wanted to ask, I know there is concern regarding OPEB and future increases in liabilities in that regard. And I wanted to ask your stern if not strict, approach to negotiations with the unions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the budget?
Yes, my name is Bob Zelton, Windsor Avenue. It's really a question that I have. These last couple of conversations confused me a little bit in terms of my understanding of the potential Ardrossan transaction. I heard a reference to 10 million of 42 million having to be dedicated to Ardrossan. It's my understanding that there's a $10 million bond issue. If this thing comes to pass, that it would be a separate raising of money through a bond issue that would not be an expenditure of the revenues that are forecast in the budget to meet the township's normal operating expenses. That's question number one. I think that's accurate. The second question is, with regard to building it into the budget for 2014, I understand that obviously there is some debt service costs that would be involved, whatever interest rate we could negotiate on the bond issue, if it is subsequently issued, is part of a debt service cost, and that debt service cost is anticipated being met by the millage increase that has been talked about with regard to the property taxes of 0.15 on average is basically what I've seen. So the debt service costs ought to be somewhat of a wash, it seems to me. With regard to the other items, I heard that there were maintenance costs. There will obviously be maintenance costs involved, both in securing the financing as well as maintaining the open space once we have it. And it's my supposition, or at least what I heard, was that there were some additional sources of revenue that were going to help us meet those costs, whether they're contributions or grants or whatever they are. So I want to make sure I'm clear that when I walk away from here, I have kind of a feeling that the impact on the budget would not be substantial on the operating budget. We're confusing the capital expenditure sometimes with the normal operating costs, and I want to make sure I can keep that separate in my own mind. So it's fundamentally a question, and if I'm inaccurate, I'd like to know. If I'm accurate, a confirmation would be great. Thank you.
My sense is that it would fundamentally impact the operational budget, because we would have to raise the millage and then pay that millage over a 14-year period, something like that, or 11-year
Correct.
period.
I understand that. That part I understand.
The debt service will be, I believe it was $470,000 per year.
Sounds that way on 10
But-
million,
but
about
that,
4%.
You know, I don't know the actual date of the bond issuance.
Right.
What is that, John? Right, we're looking at 2015, so it's actually outside the scope of the 2014 budget. But it will end up in the projections of the budget.
I understand. But it should be a wash. There ought to be revenue coming in from the additional millage as well as expenses going out for debt service. So it's a wash on the bottom line.
It's a wash for the acquisition. However, there are, as you mentioned, some other costs
Right.
that may impact the budget.
Right.
And I want to assure you that right as we speak, the staff and the CARFAC are working on the Phase 2 analysis.
Great.
And that goes through all of those other expenses, where they might come from, how they might impact us.
Right.
But the 11.6 and change that has been presented, that's what the bond goes towards, and then the private funding and grant funding would supplement the 10
Right.
million. But there are other costs, there are closing costs, there, as you said,
understand.
could be maintenance costs and whatnot.
Right. I understand all that. I
And
just
the
don't want to
10
have
and
the impression that,
Just so you know, the 10 million and 32 has nothing to do with Ardrossan. That's 10 million that we're already paying in debt service, has nothing to do with Ardrossan.
Okay.
The 1032, that had nothing to do with 10 million.
Yeah, it's debt
Okay.
service plus pension,
Yeah.
liability
Yeah.
payments and whatnot.
okay, I understand. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment about the budget?
Rob Murdoka, 6th Ward.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Elaine. Nice to meet you here again. Two specific questions on the budget. I think Phil kind of mentioned one, but just to be clear, when you put together the subsequent event, I guess you'd say the potential pieces of the Ardrossan property purchase, could you call that out as a sort of a top sheet where it just shows, we now have a baseline from a month ago. Will you be able to show the assumption, the revenue impact and the expense impact over that 5-year history? And so we just, and the assumptions of that, just so we can pull that out of the document. Is that reasonable to ask that?
if the board would like to see it, we could do it.
I think it's kind of baked in, right? So
Well,
you're
the
gonna
reason
be
I
adding
asked,
it in
John,
on both
I'm
sides?
sorry, I know I'm interrupting you, I apologize, but the reason I think it's to ask is, aside from this $16 million building, the potential $12 million purchase is fundamentally the most significant thing that's ever happened in this township in its history, probably, expenditure-wise. So in terms of it being, I don't know the governmental word for it in accounting, but this is a potential material subsequent event that would be footnoted and called out fairly obviously. So I think that would be useful to show. And also to Bill's point, both the revenue piece and the expense piece, there could be some development revenue income from it, and also the carry costs and the expenditure expenses. But that'd be useful to just see that as like a salient bullet point footnote.
Well, I'm not going to expect Bill to create a new report, but under fund accounting, Bill will be adding the additional forecast for the debt service. He'll be adding the additional carrying, the expenses for if there's any maintenance or services attributed to that property. And then but as a consequence of the development that will happen there as well, there'll be revenue that will be reported. Now, the revenue increase, you're asking, would we be able to report this separately?
Yeah, no, both.
And-
I'm
and
just
the
saying
expense.
the
You want-
effect of the potential Ardrossan, to see it easily separately. Both the revenue, and to be fair, yes, both the revenue. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an easy.
I think it's going to get done. It's just, it may not be necessarily part of the budget process, but it's going to be part of phase 2.
The budget was a month
But in
ago,
order
right?
to,
Right.
I
So-
don't want to speak for Bill,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the phase 2 data will end up in the budget. But I don't know the timing of phase 2,
All right, all right.
but it will all be transparent in the end. But I think in terms of the 2014 budget, because in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily have a material impact on that budget. It does, though, on all the forecasting, for 2015, 16, 17, and so on.
I'm going to back out of this because this is less of my two questions.
Madam President,
I don't want to start arguing about it by accident.
Madam President, if I may, we'll
Yes,
do
ma'am.
that. We'll do that.
It's my lucky day. My second question, which is really going to be my only question, is for this budget cycle, could you, for the December, whenever it comes up to vote, could you put in your best attempt, whether it relates to what CARFAC comes up with or not, the actual phase 2 and due diligence expenses that will be happening between, the rest of this year, and which probably will get paid in the beginning of 2015 for the efforts to figure out the due diligence of the Ardrossan stuff? Is that,
Yeah, that'll be included.
okay, that was it. All right, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Philip Wilson. I did want to clarify what I did say earlier to the gentleman's comment back here. The $10 million that I referred to,
We
We got
clarified
it.
that.
We-
We clarified
yeah.
that.
oh, we did?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Plus,
Yes.
long-term
Had nothing to do with Ardrossan. You said that.
We did?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
If you were paying attention, you would have heard it.
All right.
So the other thing I wanted to make clear is we've talked about phase 2. Now, I'm a stickler on this only because I'd like to see, I'm trying to make sure we're going to see, as a resident, what the impact of Ardrossan is to us long-term before a vote is made. And I hear phase 2, that we're going to get this in phase 2. That's the Ardrossan review, phase 2 of the development proposal, correct?
No,
Is
it's
that phase 2 of the budget?
the open space acquisition policy. It's our internal document.
Okay, I'm using the wrong terms. All right, so, but
Okay.
phase 2 is
It's
related
an
to.
analysis. It's a
Yes.
deeper analysis.
And we're all gonna hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna all hear that in regards to how it impacts the budget before a vote is made.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Is there any other public comment on the budget? All right, well, we're not taking a vote tonight, so we will continue the conversation and the hearings on the budget as the months go on. And next, we will move on to a discussion of Ordinance 2013-22.
Madam President, if I may briefly, there is a vehicle that has its lights on. It's a blue four-door BMW. Last four digits, 7587. Your lights are on. I feel like I'm at a sporting event, but your car lights are on. So, okay.
Jeez, car lights on, not paying attention. You can go.
Okay, so this is a discussion of Ordinance 2013-22, approving an agreement of sale regarding Ardrossan. And this is our second public discussion, and this is mostly to hear from the community about how you feel about this. But before we go ahead and start taking comment, I just want to give kind of an update of the schedule. So this was introduced and discussed on the 11th, a week ago. This is our second public meeting regarding it and taking public comment on today, the 18th. We have a scheduled hearing for next Tuesday, the 26th, on this issue. The Phase 2 analysis, as I mentioned earlier, is now occurring, and our staff and the CARFAC anticipates that should be ready in the beginning of December, and hopefully around December 5th. That will be ready and posted, so that everyone can start to take that in and digest it. After that, we have another hearing just on Ardrossan scheduled for December 9th, which I would imagine much of that discussion will center around the Phase 2 analysis and the CARFAC input. So given that schedule, and we'll see how tonight goes, at the end of this meeting, I am going to bring up whether we indeed want to hold, hello, Kevin, whether we want to hold whether we feel it's necessary to hold the meeting next Tuesday, or we can hold off and wait till after the Phase 2 analysis comes in. But let's see how tonight goes, and then we'll have that discussion about whether we feel it merits another hearing before the hearing on the 9th. The other point I wanted to make was that you'll notice that Commissioner Jim Higgins is not here tonight. He is out of the country, so he is not even listening live. But he is committed and wants everyone to know that he will watch every minute of everything that's said tonight. So he will be fully aware of the community input that comes forth tonight. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and invite the residents to come up to the mic and give us your opinion.
Well, I'll start us off with a couple of things then. So extensions of things that we discussed the other night. One, there was a discussion about the capability for additional building on the site, and I believe it was Colleen Price who identified the concern. And I discussed the concerns with John Rice, and I think that the concerns are valid. And I don't know if people are fully aware of that. So I do believe that has to be explained. Somebody else would be better at explaining it than me. But I think the concerns are valid and have to be addressed. Second, there was the discussion of the capability to use the zoning process to acquire land and not have to pay for it. Again, I believe that could happen. I don't know that it will happen or that the board wants it to happen, but there is that possibility, whether we would own the land or whether others would own the land. That would be part of the negotiation. But it is possible through our zoning mechanism for a sizable portion of that land to be dedicated as a result of the density modification. And then the last issue is the case of beer metaphor came up, and everyone chuckled at the case of beer metaphor. Even those that, many chuckled, even many that were not in support of it. But a couple of things. So we identified this as one case of beer. But we have a stormwater fee, which will be 3 cases of beer, and we have an OPEB obligation, which will be 3 cases of beer. So we have 7 cases of beer that we're putting on, not one. And then the real concern here is the marginal cost of that case of beer, because at some point, the board will stop and it will not raise taxes anymore. And so it isn't $40, it's what do we get for that $40? So for that $40, we would get about 5 police officers, we'd get about 8 public works employees, we'd get what I believe to be the entire capital demand of the fire department and the police department, and then probably have some left over. And we probably get our entire public works capital for the cost of that one case of beer. So when we express it as a case of beer, it seems to be minimized. When we express it as the opportunity cost of that case of beer, I think it's evaluated differently. So those are my 3 comments before I listen. Thank you.
Okay. I would re-invite residents to come up and participate. Don't be shy.
Hello, Jim Schneller, St. David's. I have the pleasure of often going to the Willows, bicycling on these roads, and enjoying township meetings and seeing the process at work. I'll be very brief. I know the board's accustomed to my views about open space and my revelations that they are increasingly alarming to an increasing number of people because of policies, more of the larger sphere of politics. As for the details of the plan, I wanted to ask you, I am unable to find a statute in the municipal code that expressly allows you to purchase land, and especially that allows you to purchase land in regard to the ultimate workings of a density modification or similar conditional use type implement. In the same vein, I note that the statutes, let me say this part. The statute also expressly discourages use of land across a busy street or artery. And what you have here is a stretch, 2 of the 3 plots are a stretch of land across a really busy and difficult to crosswalk country road that's totally in derogation of the plan. And there's reasons for that, which I think are obvious. I also object equally strongly because of the traffic-intensive nature of the only road passing by all 3 plots. They're convenient for map drawing, they're convenient for linking, but this is a traffic-intensive ravine we're talking about. And we're talking about a viewshed that benefits commuters. I really think that we could take a better look at where to use this money, or if to use it at all. I think the natural process of the landowner in designating his 15% would give the township the long-range intent of the law. I also object that the simple laying out of a creek bed series of plots is really not very people-intensive. People don't want to walk along a picturesque creek if you can hear Darby Paoli zooming past, and the smog that collects there in any given weather configuration. Finally, as far as the viewshed, it was said at the conditional use hearing the other night that this was crucial, that there were, Plan B was Plan A was bringing houses too close to the intersection of Newtown and Darby Paoli. And this beautiful prairie, which it is in need of maintaining. And I think this is a little bit far-fetched. Noting, of course, that 2 other conditional use or 2 other density modifications have nicely resulted in large buffers. Won't the same happen here? The same is exactly what's happening here. And people who've moved into the hilltop communities, including Ravenscliff, have had at their whim whether to plant their backyards intensely or not. And what you have is juxtaposition of a place that's invisible. You have a beautiful place. You can see the pool. You can see the details in the pool. But that's up to the landowners. And when you're talking about at the top of the hayfield, the evidence of those homes being there cannot be obliterated. We're really not talking about a very, very realistic objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other public comment?
Hi, Tom Crane from Cumberland Place in Bryn Mawr. This is sort of a sidebar, but I wanted to introduce it. I'm a great fan of Chanticleer, and I've noticed with great pleasure how much it's increased its popularity. Every summer it seems to get more and more crowded. And the thought that Ardrossan and the expansion of that area as a public availability for that kind of use or similar to it is very appealing to me. And I just provide my words of support.
Thank you. And here.
Good evening. I'm Colleen Price from Atterbury Road. I was at the conditional use hearing on Monday night, and I heard the Radnor Conservancy come up and talk about, I think what Jim was just speaking about. I think the whole intent of buying the rye field is that you wanted to keep it an open space. And what's happening now is the owner is going to build, I think, 4 or 5 houses that you will see. And it kind of destroys the whole idea of what you're looking for. So, I mean, it's my suggestion. I'm looking at the plans. They have about 100 to 130 acres that are still open. And I think under the agreement of sale, the conditional use application has to be approved, you know, in significantly the way it is. You can move, I think, those 4 lots back, or 5 lots, whatever it is. There's plenty of open space on here. And I would ask you, I don't know how to get somebody to ask John Rice, because we only have one more conditional hearing at that night, I guess it's this Thursday, to ask the applicant to move it back, or just say that, and I think you always have had the power to do it, it's in the best interest of the township. We're trying to buy this land. We don't want to see these houses on the ridge. Move them back. And you have plenty of availability to put those lots elsewhere with all the open space that's in here. And obviously, it's not going to impact his sale either. Mr. Scott is buying a bunch of land from other trusts. It's a complete cash-out deal. They're splitting the money 60-40. It's not like somebody wants to live in this house and they really want their view. It's just we're selling the property. So if you don't get your one big house that you wanted on the right field, we'll go get 2 houses in the middle. Would make a whole lot more sense and really, I think, effectuate what you're trying to do. And the other question I have, and you know, I've gotten into actually an argument at Penn State Tailgate this weekend about how many houses can be built there. And I have the density modification schedule and what they're applying for. And it is up to either 154 homes can go there or 167 right now. So you could give Mr. Scott $11 million and think you're getting 64 houses there, whatever, and he can put in 100 the next second. Goes right back in and gets this. And I think that's been the rub of my neighborhood and why there's been such an argument at the conditional use hearing, that it's sort of, there's a potential for a huge build out here, and I don't think that's what anybody intended. I don't know if you need to get a copy of these. It's actually online from the conditional use application. It's called MT9. So my suggestion is, at those hearings, Mr. Scott has said he doesn't intend to do that, but he will not restrict it in any way. If it doesn't work out, it's his idea to conserve it. They're going to build it out, no restrictions. You're going to get 167 houses there. And I think that's very different from what you've been proposing. So my suggestion is, I think there's a way to, again, effectuate his intent. He's saying he wants to have this middle section all open, and these people are going to dedicate their land in a conservation easement. And he can't say now it's not developable or they won't get their tax break. I think the conditional use hearing on Thursday, they could say, you can build your 64 houses right in the middle, and all these new owners, which he supposedly and testified to, has already identified, all 15 of them. They're all ready to come in, buy this property, and dedicate it. Make them do it. If they don't do it, and they build in there, you only got 64 houses on 300 acres. And again, that's your intent. And you would end up with all these houses in the middle and all the open space around the end, which is what a lot of people had hoped for in the density modification procedure. And the only other suggestion I have is, you know, you are funding the money here, and you're not paying out till 2015. the first phase of Mr. Scott's development is to build out this middle section where it's supposed to be 100 to 130 acres that stay open. Say you're not going to pay him a portion of it, half of it, until that is fully developed, whatever that means to him. Whether he's going to put 164 in there or 64, because at least you'll know when you get to that point, and maybe there'll be some redress if you find out that the real intent was to put 164 houses on that lot. Get the township to pay for the perimeter area that I think you could have gotten if you had negotiated through a density modification. So I mean, I think open space is a great idea. I'm just trying to propose, I think, some ideas that everybody gets what they want, from the Radnor Conservancy to the taxpayers to people on the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen.
Good evening. My name is Mary Fran Ballard. I've lived in the township like 30-plus years. All of that time, I've been either a leader for open space and environmental concerns in Radnor, or as close a follower as I could be. And so I want to quickly just give you a summary of what I think covers this whole subject and skips the small technicalities. I think there are two steps to taking an action of this kind. The first, Radnor accomplished when the bond issue passed. A great deal of the discussion about the bond issue was about open space. And it passed the whole township. It doesn't have just people here and people here. The whole township was in favor of open space, which to me goes with the environmental concerns that arise from open space. Now, years have gone by, but now Mr. Scott is making, or the township is making a deal. A deal is in prospect, and you all are hearing the details. The second step is to make that deal. And I think the details of what's been proposed have both addressed open space and the environmental concerns. So, except that I can't read my handwriting, it's I think that's where we're at. We're ready to act on the basis of the second step, and it's up to you all to do it and not delay too long for every question. There's lots of questions, but these experts over here will handle most of them for you. So that's what I suggest is it's time. We have step one was taken, step two is being taken. Make the best deal you can and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Fran.
That's a hard act to follow. Leslie Morgan, 12 Farm Road. I guess some of the questions that were asked, could we get the light, can somebody put the light over here? And maybe we can get this posted on the informational website portion. Part of the appraisal done. Oh, thank you, John. part of the appraisal done by the Natural Lands Trust person who then we adopted was the whole build-out of the main tract. And you can tell because a little piece was shown on the website, and it goes up to 142 lots. So I know that we can get the whole picture for everybody to see what the true implication of, hold on. Is this on? Okay. The true implication, people keep talking about, since there is no deed restriction, or am I confused about that? I would like to ask you, Madam Chairwoman, is there deed restrictions on the open space left after this application for 64 to 87 homes? Are there deed restrictions on what I am calling the I-lots?
Not a part of that process, so I'm not really going to make representations. But as far as my own personal understanding is, no, they're not offering deed restrictions.
Excuse
But-
me.
Yeah,
I think it would be prudent for John Rice to elaborate on that for
The
us.
15%, the common open space, that'll be deed restricted. The investment lots, no.
So the investment lots, and John, they range from what's going to be left over between 113 acres and 133 acres. I may be off by 1 or 2 acres, you guys, but that is the fact, correct, John?
I don't know what the acreage is. I think
Well,
it's
it's-
less than 100 acres.
It's actually more, John. It's on our sheets in the application that's filed. I think it's on page 10 and page 10A. At the very bottom, we can find it.
Excuse me, do you mind if I, to support that point?
Yes.
But the spirit of that is accurate, whether the number is 110 or 130.
Yeah, I don't know,
The spirit
Don.
of that,
Right.
that there's a sizable amount of homes
Acreage.
that can be built that are in addition to the 64 plus or minus that we're seeing on the current plan.
There's acres that are not part of the conditional use plan that are set aside, and there really hasn't been any question about that, I think, both in front of the Planning Commission and in front of the hearing officer. The applicant's attorney has been pretty straightforward with what they're proposing to do in order to keep the density at 64, 65, or 60, whatever, between 64 and 87 homes is what they're proposing to do. So on the conditional use plan, they've laid out the number of homes they want. They've laid out their 15%, which is about 45 acres, I think, which will be deed restricted. Those other areas are basically, on that plan, proposed to be not built upon, with the position that they could come back down the road and file another conditional use application or a new conditional use application if their conservation plan doesn't fly. That's the proposal that's in front of the hearing officer. But that's what I think Ms. Morgan's referencing, the investment parcels is the way they've been described by the applicant.
It's on page 10 at the very bottom.
I don't
They-
think anybody disagrees,
Okay.
Leslie. It's just,
Okay,
this is public comment. This is not the
so.
conditional
well,
use hearing.
No, and I understand that, John, but unfortunately, everywhere we read, and even like my trash guy in Radnor, he's been a long time in playing, he goes, they're saving Ardrossan. And I go, no, they're building a bunch of homes, and it could go further than that. And he goes, no, that's not what the paper said. So I am trying to make that clear. I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but one of the ways we could clear it up again is that this piece of just a portion is peeking out on the website. And this is drawn somewhere. We have this. And so it shows all the lots that could be. And so that would be our maximum under this conditional use, unless they gave us more open space. I'm just saying that, okay? And the other thing I thought was, for maybe the next meeting, whenever that is, whether it be in December or next week, there's something called a rate of return analysis, even for preservation. Has anybody looked at doing that and showing us what the rate of return on a preservation basis is? And comparing that to maybe other parcels that we've purchased, or what other townships have done with large tracts? Has anybody done a rate of return analysis? Because Elaine, I agree with you, it's an investment. and we want to know what our rate of return is. So has anybody from the board, or maybe it would be Bill's office, done a rate of return analysis, or the Carfax people, on a preservation basis, since we're calling this a preservation, situation? So what percentage of the lots are you not building compared to what is being built or what could be built? What percentage of the land are you saving? This kind of thing. Maybe am I the only one who knows about the rate of return analysis?
There's a financial analysis going on right now as
That's
part
financial,
of phase 2.
but in terms of what foundations do and what preservation boards do when they look at deals, and they say good deal, bad deal, average deal. Have we looked and stacked this against what foundations do who go and buy this stuff, or preservation groups or land trust groups? Have we done a rate of return analysis like they do?
I think the answer is no. I think it is the anticipation of the board, anyone can correct me if they feel otherwise, that the information that we will get in the phase 2 will allow us to make a determination like that. But as far as I know, no formal analysis like the one you have identified was either done or is being done.
Okay. I might bring one next time.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening, Hank Mahoney, 200 East Beech Tree Lane in Wayne. Last week, when you had your first meeting on the issue, I handed out some papers to you. One of them was a report prepared by eConsult Solutions, which is the economic benefits of preserving the open space at Ardrossan. The author of that report is Li Huang, who's standing to my right. He was engaged by the Radnor Conservancy. In order to do a study and analysis of the economic benefits of preserving open space. The reason we got to him was because his company was involved in the study called The Economic Value of Protected Open Space in Southeastern Pennsylvania, which was produced by them on behalf of Green Space Alliance and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. Mr. Huang has a brief presentation, PowerPoint presentation, if Jim could put the screens on. And
let me just interject that we were alerted today that this would be about 10 minutes, which is fine. Great.
That's
Thank
probably
you for
about
calling
right.
ahead. That was
Right.
very kind.
Justin, to give you Mr. Huang's qualifications, he has an undergraduate degree from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in economics. He has a graduate degree, Master of Public Administration at the University of Pennsylvania's Fells Institute of Government. He's been involved for many years since his original graduation from Penn, involved with economic studies and development plans on behalf of a wide variety of clients. So with that, Mr. Huang.
Thank you, Hank. Thank you, Commissioners, Madam Chair. I really appreciate your time this evening. I will keep to the 10 minutes, or perhaps will be prodded when I get to 9.5 minutes. I also appreciate the testimony before. eConsult Solutions sits at the intersection of economics, public policy, and strategy. We, of course, have our own personal opinions. We, of course, get hired by one side or another side. We feel very strongly in the importance of public discourse. We're trained as economists to see that there are trade-offs, that there are two sides to every story, and it's great to see that those stories are getting out there and that you're taking them seriously. I really appreciate that. That's very important to me personally and to our firm. And it's in that spirit that we bring our findings. We were hired by Radnor Conservancy. We do hope that the information here is informational and is used to help make what I'm sure is a tough decision. A little bit of framing of kind of how we approach this. A lot of times, and I talked about trade-offs, land use is a great example of trade-off. If you use land for one thing, you cannot often use it for another thing. When you are talking about preserving a particular piece of land versus developing it, oftentimes the argument is financial on one side and aesthetic or emotional on the other side. It is important to preserve this open space. No, we need to develop it because we need the ratables, and two sides often talking not quite towards each other. And what we have done a lot of, and Hank mentioned one of many studies that we've done on the economic benefits of trails, of open space, of green infrastructure, is to inject this notion of the economic benefits of open space. So when you're thinking about preserving versus developing, one must consider not just if I develop it, I increase my ratables. If I preserve it, then I have this nice aesthetic thing. One also needs to consider that when one develops, there are, in addition to new revenues, sometimes new expenditures. And one also needs to consider that when one preserves, there are sometimes significant economic benefits, real benefits in terms of financial implications, in this case for the township. And so that bolded area on the bottom is the subject of our report and of today's remarks. The big piece here is this notion of property value near open space. One of our great findings in many of the studies that we've done in this space is this notion that property values carry a premium because of proximity to open space. We call it kind of the realtor test. If a realtor tells you, here's a house, and by the way, it's close to X, that's telling you that whatever X is, it's good to be close to it, and it's the sort of thing that you want to pay a premium for. And in using econometric techniques, we can attempt to quantify what that premium is. What is the incremental gain associated with proximity to X? In this case, open space generally, and specifically the open space parcels that are in mind. In this analysis, we were informed by our study of the entire 5-county region. I want to note that the amount of premium really depends on the type of open space and the use or uses that take place on the open space. I understand that trails are being contemplated. This is a particularly impactful sort of thing when it comes to people being willing to pay a premium for houses near open space. Residential real estate is very well behaved in terms of you have lots of transactions that represent statistical observations of a willing buyer and a willing seller agreeing to a particular price for a particular structure in a particular location that has a number of characteristics. And using statistical techniques, we can suss out one particular characteristic, in this case, proximity to open space. And we estimate that the incremental property value impact associated with proximity to the open space parcels in question is about 1% of property value. There is about $1.34 billion of aggregate residential real estate value within 1 mile of the parcels in question. So 1% of that would be 13 million. Another way of thinking of that is if you were to pull out that acreage and replace it with something that had neither a positive benefit or a negative benefit, then the house values in that area would drop by $13 million.
What's your definition of proximity?
In this case, 1 mile. Okay.
Same 1 mile you referred to.
Yes. And so if that is properly accounted for in your assessments, then you're talking about a reduction. Now, the 13 million represents a one-time wealth reduction, right? Houses for most of us are the biggest thing on our balance sheet because they're assets, and our assets would reduce in value. The implication for the township, if this is accounted for in assessments, is that you would see an annual reduction in your property tax base and therefore in your property tax revenues, township as well as the county and the school district. And in the aggregate, if you throw in the county, you're looking at about $300,000 a year less in tax revenues because of the property value diminution resulting in the open space not existing there. I'll conclude by noting that there are other positive economic impacts associated with open space. I understand that there are other people that are testifying later tonight that will get into the details of various ecological services that are rendered by open space. But it is a growing body of economic literature in which one can assign a dollar value to various ecological services that are rendered by open space. On a proportionate basis, we believe that that number is about $60,000 a year. We also believe these next two are somewhat overlapping. In other words, if you're trying to kind of add all these things together, you're going to need to take a little bit of a haircut because the second and the third things are somewhat overlapping. When we use open space, we don't pay anybody, but we derive value. Economics isn't always just dollars and cents. It's also something called utility, or I've often described it as happyosity. That's not a technical economics term. But when we use open space in a variety of ways, we derive value. And there are willingness to pay surveys that place a dollar value on that utility that we gain by walking or hiking or bird watching or what have you. And we believe that that number is about $400,000 a year. That is somewhat overlapped with this notion of if the open space allows for active recreation, there is again a growing body of literature that connects proximity and access to open space, additional exercising, better health outcomes, and therefore lower healthcare cost reduction, both in the present.
Is that compared to zero? though?
Excuse me?
Is that compared to zero?
The healthcare cost reduction is based on the counterfactual is I don't have this open space and people exercise.
What if you have enough open space already or enough activities already?
And I'll get to that in a second. That's an important consideration, this notion of marginal amount of open space. What we did here was a proportional exercise that says, in the aggregate, there's this much open space, and as a result, there's this much additional exercising, and therefore this much additional healthcare cost reduction. Let us now winnow it down to the particular acreage in question. Now, it's almost certain that that relationship is not linear, and I'll get to that in my concluding remarks. So it's possible that the healthcare cost reduction is far greater than 1 million or far less than 1 million. These are simply order of magnitude estimates to provide a context for different categories of economic benefits that are associated with protected open
So
space.
do you mind if I follow up with that?
Sure.
So the 1 million is due to the 70 acres in particular, in your opinion?
Correct. We've calculated a per acre amount of healthcare cost reduction and of all these categories and assigned it to the 70 acres. And these are the numbers that we came up with. Let me just jump to this point that I'm making, which is that it's really difficult to know exactly what these numbers are. These are simply estimates and extrapolations. The actual economic benefit will depend on how nice the open space is, what uses there are, and those are things that where the marginal benefit could be zero or it could be very great. I don't know those things, and as is often the case, I'm comfortable saying I don't know. But I do want to introduce these concepts of categories of economic benefits so that as you're weighing these options of...
But if you're uncomfortable, why'd you attach numbers to them?
To provide an order of magnitude estimate.
But you could argue it's fiction.
I wouldn't say that it's fictional, it's fact-based. Yeah.
They're all based on assumptions. You don't know whether or not there's enough using the healthcare cost reduction. You don't know how much healthcare,
These are based on conservative assumptions and not knowing exactly whether the open space parcels in question will be higher performing or lower performing than the typical open space parcels throughout the 5-county region. If it turns out for a variety of reasons that they are lower performing, these numbers would be lower. If it turns out, for example, if there are really nice trails, as part of our open space study, we studied the Radnor Trail, and we found, for example, that had a $69,000 per house property value impact, which is much higher than what we assigned to this because of the nature, the active use nature of that particular open space parcel. So that represents a fairly high usage of open space. There are, of course, different kinds of open space throughout the 5-county, and we took straight down the middle. And so if it turns out that this particular open space is just like that, then these numbers will probably be pretty correct. And if it turns out that they're more
But if it's the same
intensive
people
or
who walk
nicer-
on the trail, go over here and use the trail, there's no incremental improvement in terms of healthcare costs.
Let me answer that in two ways. I would argue, and I don't want to put words in anyone else's mouth, I'm just speaking my own opinion here, that if you have a lot of generic open space and you add a little bit more, then in many of these categories, the incremental benefit is relatively little, to your point. I would argue that trails do not behave in that way, and in fact, trails can have a multiplier effect. So if I have 10 units of open space and I add an 11th, it doesn't necessarily get me 10% more benefit because I already have 10. But if I have 10 miles of trail and I add an 11th mile, not only could that be a 10% benefit, it could actually be a more than 10% benefit, because one of the things that we've learned is that trails, by being redundant or multi-use in nature, can have a multiplier effect such that an increase of 10% of trail mileage may get you more than 10% increase in benefit. So I think it really does depend on the type of usage, and I am completely sympathetic with where you're coming from, that if you have 100 units and you add 5 more, do you get 5% more benefit? It depends. Sometimes not, and sometimes yes. Those were all the remarks that I had, and I'm happy to take any additional questions.
I had a question. You had stated, and I've read, that the value, the perceived value, the actual value increase in property value and utility is based on 2 very important things. First is proximity, and the other is the use. So our township is, I believe it's about 13 square miles total. You know, how do we compute the value? How do we demonstrate value? For instance, I represent the 7th Ward, which is probably close to 2.5 miles from the site. Might be further, I haven't mapped it yet. I would assume there's no imputed value for someone that lives 2.5 to 3 miles away and has no access to the trail. And the only way to get to the trail, the only way to get to Ardrossan is to drive. So I'd like you to respond to that. And then to Kevin's point and the use question, Commissioner Higgins had said, you know, how much open space is enough? Meaning, we already have in the township a couple hundred acres of open space. Some of it is accessible, some of it is not. At this particular site, we have a pretty decent amount. And, you know, by adding these 70 acres, you know, is this an incremental improvement, or is this a step change improvement in the utility of that site?
Yeah, those are great questions. Let me answer or attempt to answer the second one first. There is a notion of diminishing returns. I did not study or cannot comment on whether you are, you know, on this side of the curve or on this side of the curve in terms of adding more will get you more, or adding more will get you far less more than, you know, because you've already reached a point of saturation. I cannot comment on that. As to your first question, let me answer that from a technical standpoint and then from a kind of logical standpoint. Technically, we did just look at the property value impact for houses that were generally proximate to the open space parcels in question. Logically, the reason for that is that the premium associated with proximity to protected open space does not need to one does not need to physically use the open space in order to assign a premium to a particular amenity, in this case, open space. It could be that you like to use it, and so being near it means that you can get to it faster. It could be that you like seeing it. It could be that psychically you like being near it. It could be that you don't care about any of that, but you know that the person that you're going to sell your house to will care about it in some sort of way, and you know, whether intuitively or through economic studies, that people are willing to pay a premium to be near open space. And so you are willing to pay a premium for it because that's how real estate works. I cannot comment on whether there is a premium attached to a house that's 2.5 miles away. You can make an argument either way. I have not made that argument and will not make that argument, but I can buy both sides of that. What we looked at was proximity, not just because of convenience of using or even seeing, but because that's what the literature says, that's what your realtor would say, and that's what most informed homeowners who are thinking of their house as an investment would believe in and account for that in their financial decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A follow-up to that, then, it's at least possible, theoretical, that you could have diminished value as you extend further away, meaning those that are on the fringe. I'm imagining a GIS map around the open space with elevated value around it, but diminished value around the exterior because they're paying the same amount on a whatever basis they have to make the payment, but having considerably less impact from it.
Yeah, the literature as well as our own study of open space does seem to suggest that there is a positive impact, but it attenuates pretty significantly as you go further away. So the closer you are, the better off you are, and then the premium associated with proximity is still positive, but it's less positive as you go further away. That is typically the shape of those curves.
But it has to get to zero eventually.
Eventually it does get to zero, yes.
Well, but there's the other piece of this, Kevin, it's not only does it get to zero, but there's nothing worse in terms of value proposition that when you pay and you don't get the value proposition. So if you live within a mile, if you're lucky enough to be buying a new home at Ardrossan, you're going to get immediate benefit from this open space. So in some ways, you could argue that we're subsidizing the new buyers of Ardrossan because we're ensuring that there's additional open space for them. But conversely, the folks who live in my neighborhood, who live more than 2.5 miles away, we're paying for that. We're subsidizing that benefit to those who will be living immediately adjacent to the open space. And this is the dilemma that I face as a representative of my ward, is that it's hard to show value for the homeowners that live more than 2.5 miles away. And yet we're paying, as it turns out, I've seen an analysis, that the 7th Ward is actually paying more as in an aggregate in property tax to pay for this acquisition than those that actually live in the 3rd Ward.
Right.
So we have a dilemma where the 7th Ward conceivably is paying more as a ward, as in aggregate, for this acquisition, yet we're getting virtually no imputed value.
Well, I'm sympathetic to your argument, but not to your last statement. It is true that from a personal balance sheet standpoint, the property owners that are near these parcels are having the value of their big asset stabilize, if not go up, and that the cost of that is being spread out throughout the township. But as I noted in these remarks, so is the benefit. The property value impact may be concentrated, but the property tax revenue impact is enjoyed by the entire township and by the entire school district. The ecological services rendered, if there are any, prevent the township from having to fork over dough in the marketplace to render those ecological services. The direct use benefit, I am told, is not just the immediate user, the immediate neighbors, but the entire township. And the economic impact confers to the township as a whole. So I'm very sympathetic to this asymmetry that you're referring to as far as the property value impact versus who's paying for it. But that's why I think it's important to talk about these other economic impacts as well as to talk about the property tax revenue consequences of the property value gain.
Well, that was a very nice presentation, and you stated very elegantly and eloquently what many of us know intuitively, that being in a township that has the wherewithal and the foresight to protect this type of asset and to develop it in a way where all of our residents can use it for recreation helps all of us in our property values. And, assets where, like the trail that we have now and the trail that will hopefully be developed at this location, you don't have to live, I live within a mile, but I would still get in my car to go. I mean, the nature of our township is there isn't a whole lot of, unless you're in downtown Wayne, you get in your car to go places. And the fact that you have to get in your car to use the trail that we have now has not in any way negatively affected our use of the trail. And people who live close by still get in their cars to drive to the trail. That's just the nature of how our township is set up. But I appreciate you coming in tonight and giving this very nice presentation. Can people watching at home or in the audience tonight access your report?
Yeah, I believe it's on the township website. Is that correct?
It's
Conservancy
on the
website. Okay,
Radnor
excuse me.
Conservancy
All right.
website.
Okay.
Okay, so if someone wants to, and we can probably arrange to have it put on the township website as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Let me go real quick.
I can keep it under 5 minutes. Could we get this up here? Just a couple quick questions. Sarah Armstrong, 30-year Radnor resident, 2nd Ward. Okay, question on slide 3 that we just saw in that presentation. So this house value of $1.34 billion, and then it's a 1-mile radius. What I want to show. Okay, so Radnor Township. I live up here. This is the area of discussions.
Zoom in.
This is the edge of the township.
Sarah, microphone.
That was the edge of the township. So my question is, when we calculated this 1-mile radius, did we stop in Radnor Township? Or did we actually take the 1-mile radius into Chester County, Broomall, Newtown, Easttown, whatever the other ones are? So that was actually a question, how we actually calculated that, because that is such on the edge of the township if we took a mile into another township. So that's one. And then it seems like the calculation of the house value is actually based on market value versus the calculation of any sort of tax loss based on assessment value. 2 different numbers, because otherwise you couldn't possibly get to 1.34 billion in house value in that 1-mile radius. And then in terms of where we are on the curve, I will reiterate again back to page 39 of the Township Land Exhibit in the CBFAC report. The National Recreation and Park Association has standards on how much open space you should have. Currently, Radnor Township enjoys up to 2.34 times the amount of the national standard. So that was just to answer your question, John. You were wondering about where we are on the curve. But I would like an answer actually to that question. Did that calculation include other townships who will not be paying for this?
I don't know. That might be in the report, which I think you can access on the web. Hello.
Hi, Rob Murdoka, 6th Ward. It's going to, I think this is going to be 10 to 15 minutes. I will read it. I won't ask you. No, listen, people come every 2 weeks, say plenty of things. I come once or twice a year.
So in
I'm
fairness,
following the rules.
Fine,
in
go
fairness
ahead,
to
go
Rob,
ahead.
we can't let other
That's
people
fine.
talk for 10
Go
minutes
ahead.
and then shut Rob off.
I'll let you know when it's been 10 minutes, okay?
But I will. There's one thing I'm going to say twice, just because it's coming right after Kevin. I hope my Wharton degree is fine with his Wharton degree, and my Harvard degree is fine with his other Penn or Wharton degree. And I will say that I'm saying that seriously, since Hank brought up credentials. And so I want to mention that about the Green Space Alliance report. There's 4 things. One of the things I have to do in the real estate profession is assess motivation. And there's 4 things I'll call out on that report. 1, it does not analyze the costs associated with acquiring, preserving, or maintaining land as protected open space. And that report admits that. Second thing is it was produced for Green Space Alliance and for the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. This is of note because the Green Space Alliance is an alliance of land conservation organizations, and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, although not a conservation organization, does have a stated goal of preserving another 500,000 acres of open space throughout its 9-county region. The third thing is that report was produced by 3 entities, one of which is the Keystone Conservation Trust, which is an entity focused on preserving and finding value in land. And the fourth thing is that report was funded by 2 entities, one of which is the PA Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So we have to put that report in that context. I'm going to say a lot tonight. All of it is in the context of teamwork with everyone in the room, everyone on that dais and in this community. However, some of what I say may unintendedly upset some, and some of what I say may resonate with others. But in all cases, it is all meant for the public benefit of Radnor citizens. And in no way do I mean to do anything but respect Bill, Elaine, and John Nagle's 10 to 25 years of emotional fervency on this topic. I will email this entire comment to the Township Secretary, and I ask that this entire comment be included as a complete attachment to this meeting's minutes. My intended audience for this talk is, 1, the community's taxpayer voters, if they are watching this, and 2, the board, the 7 people who have the fiduciary responsibility to care for the entire community, and 3, those future citizens of our community whom have yet to join us, but hopefully will as long as we remain sound caretakers of all that with which we have been blessed. I am an informed citizen, having agreed to volunteer freely for the township significantly over the past 4 years, and I wish to share with all of us for the benefit of all of us. Please allow me to be clear. My highlighting these issues carefully and discussing the important but boring matters of fiscal prudence are not labors of love for me. Rather, the analogy might be more like this. My role here could be akin to a person watching an innocent child on the playground only to find that that playground might have a bully. My wife, my kids, and I live in this playground, our community playground, if you will. Here, I am saddened to report perhaps I have been witnessing some members figuratively bully and manipulate the voters and taxpayers. Thus, I simply am trying to do my one part to help all of us. That is my agenda and my motive. Most of us taxpayers are very busy with our own worries in our own lives. Most simply do not have the time to understand the nuances, complexity, and ramifications of the proposed Ardrossan purchase itself under the short time frame of these hearings. Most do not know how it fits in the broader context of Radnor Township's financials and Radnor's existing virtues and benefits. Radnor citizens hope their elected government officials are acting as true and good fiduciaries rather than advancing any other interests. Radnor citizens hope you will seek to do the right things rather than potential spins and sells and possible manipulating of things. Please allow me to be clear, again, this time about potential outcomes. One potential outcome is the board believes on balance with the request for a, is that the board would believe on balance with the request for a 2014 voter referendum, and the board itself would vote to allow it to happen. A second potential outcome is, in absence of the board doing that a subset of citizens will believe in a 2014 voter referendum, enough so to put the effort in to make it happen. And a third potential outcome is, in the absence of neither the board's will or a citizen's will for a 2014 referendum, that the board and the administration use these constructive thoughts to improve the ultimate price, value, and terms, and reduce the risk of the purchase acquisition by the time it reaches a settlement table in early 2015 or early 2016. You, the board, do have a choice. You still do. If you believe the general funding referendum from 7 years ago still remains such a tremendous deal for the township citizens, and if you are so confident in this, that the 2006 general funding referendum is totally what the taxpayers of today still want, and still want in the form of the specific acquisition pieces and prices you proposed on November 11th, then you still can choose to put this to a voter referendum. You do not have to hide behind the old, stale, and incomplete referendum from 7 years ago. We are much more aware and advanced than we were 7 years ago. Much has occurred since that time. Now, putting the shoe on the other foot, you, my fellow Radnor citizens, whether sitting in this room, watching on TV, or reading this in a newspaper article, or reading the minutes, you do have a choice too. You still do. If the board does not give you the May 2014 referendum opportunity, you still can make the May 2014 referendum opportunity by collecting enough valid signatures, 10% of each ward's registered voters. That's roughly only 2,100 signatures overall. But as a fellow Radnor citizen, let us also be clear to one another. My preceding and forthcoming comment tonight is complete. I am laying out facts, professionally educated opinions, and questions which are prudent for contemplating a major land acquisition. After my submission tonight, I know I am not the person to lead a referendum effort. It will be up to the community folks who understand my comment and the impact of this potential purchase on them and the community to decide whether to take such action. I know I am not the person to lead that part of the effort. I know what my role is. My role is to alert the community by saying to the board, stop bullying and manipulating the citizens. I do encourage others to lead an effort to make a May 2014 referendum if the board's not confident enough in the merit of its proposed acquisition transaction to majority vote on its own to allow a May 2014 referendum. And if someone does lead that charge, you can count on my signature. Economics, negotiation, real estate, and land acquisition are specific areas of my expertise. And as I noted, this is my complete statement. As such, I admit my public comment tonight is and will be lengthy. My fellow citizens and friends, whether on the board or not on the board, whether possessing a similar perspective or possessing a different perspective, in order for all of us to understand my perspective, allow me to provide some context, background, and history. The remainder of my comments will be grouped as follows: a summary of me, reasons I care or why I'm here, what I want and care about, my addressing the arguments I have heard the board previously make, items which have changed in the 7 years since the Step 1 2006 funding mechanism referendum was done, real examples of what worries me, and further purchase due diligence questions if the board and/or community decide to proceed with the purchase.
Rob, I'm so sorry to interrupt you for just a moment.
Sure, go ahead.
There is a Jeep blocking the handicapped spot outside, and someone needs to get his wheelchair out. It's blocking someone's access. So if there's somebody in here that was driving a Jeep and parked near or around the handicapped spot, I would encourage you to please get out and move your car. Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting.
That's fine. Before I delve further into the above descriptions, please remember the next 5 sentences. In general, I do see tremendous value in open space. That said, I do not see appropriate value in the price and terms at which the board majority wants to pay for these particular pieces of the developer's open space, which he wants to sell to the township. I am purposely nonpartisan, and my voter card says no affiliation. The right thing to do, in my opinion, is to finish the township's own 1991 recommendation by putting this specific major acquisition, now that you have identified specific pieces of property, characteristics, and price, to a voter referendum this May. And the 2006 debt funding referendum was only step 1 of the 1991 two-step recommendation. On to the summary of me. I have a family, a wife, and 3 young boys. We are pleased to be in Radnor, our home by choice. I'm a national real estate professional, as a developer, a broker, and a project manager. And I say the following with genuine deep respect, having looked at the board website, seeing at least 12 or more higher education degrees among you, that I earned both an MBA in general management from Harvard, including taking a course called Business in the Environment, which included cases on conservation easements, and also a BS in economics from Wharton, and that I also am a CPA and a certified financial planner, as well as having earned 2 real estate professional designations, the Certified Commercial Investment Member designation and the SIOR designation. A bedrock of the Harvard General Management program is to train big picture thinkers. I was a 2010 CBFAC appointee, appointed in late 2009 by Commissioners Bill Spengler, John Nagle, John Fisher, and Kevin Higgins. And in early 2010, Bill Spengler made the motion to approve me as an appointment. I was a 2012 Open Space Subcommittee participant. Commissioner Elaine Schaefer contacted me and asked me to be on it. Reasons that I care and that I'm here. On April 30th, 2012, Commissioner Jim Higgins said he agreed that the sale of property merits a further look and that we need to be creative going forward. I am for open space, and I am for good value, and I can help the board do better. I believe, on all or most aspects of its entire purchase and diligence process if it would like me to help. What I want and care about: excellent and consistent process. Now, I promised I wouldn't ask questions, so these are just rhetorical questions because I don't know the answers and I don't know a lot about the political process. For example, I admit I do not know why Commissioner Spengler recused himself from the discussion and vote of the Luella 12 condo real estate transaction on January 23rd, 2012. Why not recuse on this Ardrossan real estate? I also care about sound negotiation. For example, I've seen Bob Zienkowski in action. Why not let Bob Zienkowski negotiate? The subset of negotiating commissioners may be quite compromised by their passion. Proper pricing, proper due diligence, and risk mitigation, and receiving what is bargained for. That's another thing I care about. Also, I care about completion of the recommended major acquisition referendum. We have not completed a referendum on a major acquisition. This action was recommended in our own 91 Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. It says, establish an open space acquisition fund to purchase parkland. Check that off. We did it in 2006. It also says major acquisitions should be the subject of a referendum. That's not done yet. Board, now here's a list of board arguments and what I think are other ways to think about these arguments. Argument 1, saving the main house. As stated publicly by the seller and development team, the trust does not intend to preserve the main house, although the plan does call for it to remain intact. Prevent development. The developer's attorney said, quote, we have our application, 87. That doesn't mean that somebody that buys an unrestricted parcel can't come in for their own approval, but we hope people buy it and donate it. Additionally, the board executive summary literature to the public threatens with hundreds, but the most homes would be 154 on the main tract, not hundreds. Only 154 is only 67 more than the 87 presented on the developer's main tract documents. These questions remain. How are you guaranteed, or how will you guarantee to the taxpayers that this $12 million cost expenditure will limit the new houses to a maximum of 78 additional houses plus the existing 9 structures on that main tract? Has the board obtained legal contractual guarantees to stop the full allowed development? Or will we all find out down the road that the seller, developer, or his future purchasers will be back into the township to build more? Third argument I've heard, be careful about more development because more population brings more school expenditures and taxes. First, even if the entire Ardrossan were built out fully to every home the developer seller depicts on his documents for the main tract, which is 154, and the Wheeler tract 6, and the Quarry tract 8, it would equal 168 homes. Second, the school board study was reported in the October 27th Suburban, which projects approximately 500 less students in our public schools within 10 years. So it appears we have the capacity, without worrying about the Ardrossan properties triggering a step function to build more schools.
Rob, I just want to let you know it's been 15 minutes. Just ask.
I'll read fast, because I won't come back. That's the good news. Save the farm. Great concept, but the CSA attempted a few years ago did not survive. Need to act now. Radnor Township is the best buyer out there. The developer will not go away. Trails. Still can do the trails without buying the Wheeler tract. This alone would save $2.4 million. According to the seller developer's plans, and unverified by us as of yet, only 6 homes can be built there according to his own plan because the remainder is a floodplain. And those homes are on the southernmost end adjacent to the existing homes on Lawrence Lane cul-de-sac. Heck, let 6 more homes go adjacent to those existing homes. That is not a lot of homes to allow to be built, and it does not bother a wide open stretch of space. Those 6 would be adjacent to the existing. There still would have a huge wide open expanse from those 6 homes northward through the floodplain. 7. We already did the referendum. No, we didn't. We established the Open Space Acquisition Fund to purchase parkland, but major acquisitions were recommended to be the subject of a referendum. This has not been done yet. The funding mechanism referendum made zero mention of Ardrossan, zero mention of size, zero mention of specific location, and zero mention of price. This is the language that was on the ballot. Shall debt of up to $20 million to finance the acquisition and preservation of real property, interest therein, and contracts related to real property, all for purposes of open space preservation, recreation, and environmental historic preservation, be authorized to be incurred as debt approved by the electors. 8, it is free or partially free due to the open space fund being funded by realty transfer tax. We, the taxpayers, do pay this. We pay it when we move in. We pay it when we move within the township, and we pay it when we move out. 9, Radnor Township finances are in better shape today than 5 years ago when the Great Recession started. This is not true. The board took care of two low-hanging fruits. It removed what some people have said, who's no longer here, a crook, and in 4 years it raised average residential taxes and fees already 29.4%. 29.4% in 4 years. And that, in just the last 3 years, Radnor Township, the government and the citizens have begun to learn of $246 million of real contractual unfunded liabilities for services previously provided and long overdue deferred CapEx. That's $236 million for the unfunded liabilities that are real, contractual, and already owed, and $10 million at least identified in township literature for the stormwater. So even if the township's finances might be in better shape, it has come at the expense of weakening the taxpayers' personal finances by jacking up residential taxes and fees 29.4% without yet the Ardrossan effect and without yet the $246 million effect. 10, Commissioner Jim Higgins insinuated that the debt is no big deal and that it is like a homeowner paying a mortgage over time. The difference in that analogy is a homeowner buys a house and pays a mortgage into the future for a future benefit, shelter, whereas we have zero future benefit of the unfunded but already owed liabilities. These are for workers' earnings already earned and services already provided. The proper analogy is paying the unfunded liabilities into the future is like paying for expensive dinners we already consumed in the past. 11, 2014 supposedly will not have a millage tax increase, but it will install a $29 fee at least for stormwater. And we've already previously installed a $36 trash tipping fee. The stormwater $29 fee equates to the $29 minimum fee equates to a 1.7% millage tax increase. Again, without the Ardrossan effect. Next, characterizing the $8 million somewhat recent settlement as an unexpected windfall. I don't believe it was an unexpected windfall. It was real money in which the township was owed, thought it was owed, and pursued vigorously to get back. There also was an assertion floated that Rob Murdaca is against open space. False. I am for open space. That is why I willingly said yes to Commissioner Schaefer when she asked me to serve on that committee, or subcommittee. 14, Commissioner Jim Higgins made an assertion that Rob Murdaca is against open space and recommended to sell nearly all the township's real estate. And it's hard to reason with someone like that. That's what he said about me. Let me clear this up. I, as part of an 8-person unanimous, nonpartisan, bipartisan consent CBFAC team, which included 2 members who today are on CARFAC, we collectively, unanimously recommended exploring the sale of only 6.4% of the available 609 public recreational acres in the township. So this excludes the additional 596 acres of private open space, which many residents also enjoy. Further, this recommendation was after an exhaustively researched and documented analysis of the copious amount of property Radnor Township has on a per-person basis, as you know, it's what Sarah already mentioned, as provided for in reputable national guidelines cited in the Radnor's own 1991 Parks and Rec and Open Space Plan. Even further, also noted that subsequently in 2011 and 12, Cressa Partners hired by the township also made quite similar suggestions. 15, the Ardrossan property should fetch a higher multiple than the Foxcatcher Listener property, asserting reasons largely based on the school district.
Rob, can you give me an estimate of how much longer you have?
How much have I been?
23 minutes.
I think we get the point, right?
7 more
We
minutes.
understand, and perhaps it would be kind to let some other people speak and then finish your comments at the end of the meeting, so that other people can get a chance to speak as well.
Okay, I can come back tonight, stay here tonight.
How much longer do you have?
7 more minutes, how's that? That's an estimate.
Why don't we do it at the end? So let's give some other people a chance to talk.
It is complete, so I would like to stay here tonight. and
It's just
finish
not
it.
fair, it's not respectful to everyone else in the room.
No, well, I will stand, I'll
It's
sit
just not
down.
respectful to everyone else in the room
I get
that
that.
wants to speak tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can come up at the end.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Linda Saul, and I'm here, hi, good evening. I'm Linda Saul, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Radnor, and I have a statement to the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township. As many of you know, the League of Women Voters at the state and local levels, has studied land use issues for decades. Such study and consensus building result in the adoption of positions from which the League of Women Voters advocates. The following comments are rendered by the League of Women Voters of Radnor as we continue to monitor and examine all activities in the township pertaining to zoning, planning, transfer, and acquisition of land. Support the protection of open space and recreational lands, and take action when appropriate. The League appreciates the time and effort that each of you has spent reviewing numerous land development matters during recent months. We're pleased that you have set aside this evening for a special meeting to deal primarily with the Ardrossan issues. Limiting the agenda is helpful to both you and the Radnor citizens who wish to provide input in this important decision. The introduction of the agreement to purchase of 71 acres of open space at your previous meeting has prompted the League to provide comments to you this evening. Fortunately, Radnor has a comprehensive land use plan that embodies the vision of Radnor residents and guides your decision-making in this area. Of particular relevance is one of the 2 goals under Section 6, Open Space and Recreation. Protect and enhance the character of the township through the acquisition and protection of open space, page 6.1. This goal is followed by specific objectives that speak to this item. Continue to acquire, protect, and preserve open space in the township. Coordinate these efforts with protection and enhancement of natural resources. Assess various methods of acquiring land or interest in land for the purpose of conserving open space, page 6.1. Create non-motorized linkages between recreation and open space facilities, township residences, businesses, and schools, and between the facilities themselves. Create linkages to regional trail systems. This document further speaks to the importance of open space in relationship to environmental resources in such areas as stormwater management, urban area greening, riparian buffer reestablishment, and reforestation projects. Even the visual enjoyment of open space was noted as an important and unique attribute that contributes to charm and character of our township. Combining open space with environment and natural resources was one of the considerations of the stakeholders of the comprehensive land use plan. When one looks at the item before the commissioners this evening, the connection between these 2 areas are evident. Here is Section 2, Environment and Natural Resources Goal. Protect the township's vital environmental values, including water resources, wetlands, floodplains, and riparian areas, woodlands, and important habitat areas, balancing the needs of development with environmental values. This in turn is followed by several objectives, with 2 being direct development to areas of minimum environmental sensitivity, prohibit development in areas of heightened sensitivity and values, such as wetlands, floodplains, riparian zones, and steep slopes. Work to preserve remaining open spaces in the township, using all direct means, such as acquisition, as well as less direct regulatory programs. Prioritize those open spaces, taking into account factors such as proximity to wildlife, habitats, and forage areas, aesthetic values, water resource values, and other factors relating to landscape ecology management. The League appreciates the opportunity to reinforce several of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive land use plan. We value the work you do and trust you will make the right decision for our township. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Hello, Doug.
I'm Doug McCone. I live on Poplar Avenue, and I won't take 15 minutes. I agree, there's a question, and Mr. Fisher is quite correct to say that in his ward won't necessarily benefit directly by having this open space out there. My contention, and I think it's right, is that because it permanently preserves open space land for the community as a whole, it does in fact benefit the people of the ward that you represent. There's no question, I don't think, in my mind or many other people's minds. Second, I've been paying close attention to the stuff that's been going on, needless to say, here, but also in the Planning Commission. And one of the comments that they make is, one of the comments that was made this evening before I got here, although I watched it on the tube, was that the big wide open spaces are not in any way, shape, or form deed restricted, and as a result, there's the possibility of development. Yes, that is true. But we must remember that the business proposition for this whole spiel here, this whole thing, is that the buyer will buy not only the modest plot of acre or acre and a half in which they will put the specific house that they're going to, but also buy another 8 or 10 acres or whatever, which they can then turn around and donate to a land trust. And the key is that they'll be able to donate so much value that they'll be able to write off through tax assessment adjustments and so forth, much of the cost of the land. They reduce the net cost that they're paying for the land by being able to die that down. If we deed restrict this property before they make such a purchase, the value of that property is going to drop by 75, 80%, because no one will buy it or would be interested in buying it if it can't be developed. I certainly understand. I really do understand the concern that people have about the fact that by not deed restricting it, there's the risk. The question is, do we have confidence enough to trust the people that are trying to do this? I'm not sure. I have a tendency to want to believe that, but you know, my point is, if we do deed restrict it, we reduce the value so much that, or if we try to deed restrict it, we reduce the value so much that it will force the owners to have to develop it in some way, because they'll need to get the revenue out of it for that. My second point is that the comment was made that Radnor has 2.4 times the national standard of the amount of open space for a given resident community or whatever across the country, and that's fine. I don't think that Radnor's a standard type of community. At one time, okay, I'm not looking for that. At one time, Radnor had vastly more than 2.4 times what the national standard was, and was being reduced. I do remember personally a time driving down Bryn Mawr Avenue and all the way from St. Aloysius Academy down to Sproul Road. There was nothing built. That was all private, open space land. Needless to say, in the 70s, they built a zillion, I like to say, but a fair number of houses in there before they built the Blue Route through there. I show how old I am. I moved away. I lived in New Jersey, which is nothing to sneeze at, for 14 years. And part of the reason that I came back here is the open space and the character of our community, the physical environment in which we all live, okay? Part of that open space is Ardrossan. Part of it is the Willows. Part of it is the open spaces that you see in places like Eastern and Cabrini and other open spaces around the campus. I would contend that we're not talking about a standard type of real estate acquisition where the normal cost-benefit analysis kind of stuff, economic analysis that business conducts really apply. In normal business rules and principles apply. The knowledge, skills, and abilities of business schools are entirely appropriate. If you're buying buildings in Philadelphia or investing in shopping centers someplace, that perfectly makes sense. But in many instances, if somebody, the only tool someone has is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, kind of thing. You try to apply the tools that you have and the practices and skills that you normally get to situations where they don't necessarily fit appropriately. Okay, and I would submit that this is one of those cases, okay, where the use of a simple business school tools is just not adequate or appropriate, okay? This land is adjacent to what is already publicly owned land, Sawmill Park, Skunk Hollow, the Willows, and this acquisition will expand the current public open space for everyone to enjoy. I do one other point, and then I'll sit down. Way back when we bought the Willows, the township first had the opportunity to buy the Willows from the then owner, and they turned it down because it didn't meet all their economic stuff. It was only after people came in and said that they were planning to develop it and came up with a sort of a preliminary plan that the township realized that they were going to lose what, for many of us, is the crown jewel of the open space that the township owns. And so as a result, they decided to turn around and, yes, they'd buy it. But by that time, it was owned by a developer, and the developer made them pay substantially more than they had an opportunity to buy it for initially. Township decided to buy it anyway. I think it was Bob LaRouche, who was down the street from me, was on the planning commission at the time and filled me in on all that stuff. I was living in beautiful New Jersey at the time. My point is that you're going to lose the opportunity if you don't buy it at this point. It will be gone forever. That's part of what happens. It would be one more reduction in the value of just living in a community like this, in my humble opinion, or not so humble opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug.
Good evening. I'm Rob Driscoll. I live in Ward 3. I like open space, and I'm not sure you think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't. And I voted for the referendum 6.5 years ago. I wouldn't do so today, and that's why I came here tonight. And the reason I wouldn't is because I think there are new information that's come out that I've found that would change my opinion. One is I know the exact number, it's $240 or $236 million of obligations that must be paid in the future. Another one is the existing 49 million or so debt. I'm using round numbers here. And I think the problem with too much debt is not, the solution to too much debt is not adding more debt. So while open space is great, I have a concern that we're adding risky debt to the township. And so back in '06, the world, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, was very different. We went through the worst recession, now called the Great Recession, for 70 years or so. And I've spoken casually to neighbors and friends, and almost everyone, in fact, I can't think of one person who doesn't agree that I've talked to, says they feel differently. The world has changed. So I am an advocate of putting this back to a referendum and saying 6.5 years ago was a long time ago. The world has changed since then. If everyone still feels the same way they did, that's wonderful. We move forward as we hope to now. If we don't, if we find out that instead, hypothetically, it's 80% of the people are voting against it, I think we'll be very glad we asked the question. And so I'm for a referendum. I think that we ought to put it to the populace and have everyone vote for it and say, now that we have a specific item to talk about, a specific price, a specific time, all of the terms here, now how do you feel? Do you still want to fund it with additional tax dollars in effect? So that, I'm not sure how that happens or whether we talk about that tonight or I just go on the record as saying that's what I support doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment?
Good evening. I'm Phil Wallace. I live in the 2nd Ward, 531 Hilaire Road. I am also president of Audubon, Pennsylvania, so I want to make my comments as both residents and ecologist or conservationist. As I look at the Ardrossan project, which I've sort of lived with everyone here for 6, 7, 8 years, I think of 3 value propositions. The first is ecological, second is viewshed, and the other is public access. On the ecological standpoint, at Audubon, when we look at nodes and corridors, island biogeography, if you will, there's a certain magic to the number 200 when it comes to birds. And when I was looking at Skunk Hollow and the willows and then the proposed 70 acres, the mathematics added up, interestingly, to 211 acres. And our science crowd has been looking very hard with Cornell at the nodes in southeastern PA. And what we're at Audubon trying to do is create these 200-acre nodes. So I would suggest, as you're thinking about the value proposition here, we have in Radnor a particularly interesting node right here in our backyard that is not only good for the birds, if you will, which is Audubon's perspective, but other wildlife and forms of nature. So I wanted to offer that as somewhat new information as you're thinking. The other is this notion of viewshed, which is so hard to calculate. We saw a lot of economics today, but I know that I do drive by that corner now, somewhat of a detour, but I go out of my way to capture that viewshed. There's something very magical that isn't particularly economic. I think the economist calls it Magenomics or some number he said. It was utility curve that he looked at, which, having gone to Wharton, I found an interesting proposition. But I find the utility of that viewshed is very powerful, and I would hope you would do everything you can to protect that, and I think you are. Trying. And the third is access. And again, that's a utility curve that I found quite interesting. Kevin, you were asking about sort of the marginal return on open space, and I found the conversation regarding adding 1 unit to a trail system particularly interesting, having lived here for 13 years and traveling to the Willows, to Skunk Hollow, to the Radnor Trail, to get out of doors with my daughters outside the ward. To your point, John, you know, is this of value to those of us who don't live in the third ward? And I would say it is, not only because it's a very large piece of open space, but it has that additional marginal utility that's probably greater than just its percentage return. And I would just finally add that this notion of averages, which the prior speaker spoke of, is why my family moved here. This is not an average place to live. This is not a standard in America, and I think all of us in Radnor live here because we believe that. And I believe this acquisition will continue to make Radnor a better place to live, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Good evening. My name is John Sheehan. I live on Windsor Avenue in the First Ward. And I think the first thing I want to say tonight is, to me, I think it would be much more helpful for the commissioners and everyone in this room to kind of try to get into the same boat and listen to each other. I think everybody has real valuable inputs into this decision-making for the township. I've lived in Radnor for 40 years. I was a young man. I love living in Radnor Township. I've raised my 3 children here. Within about 10 days, my 4th grandchild will be born, and I hope to have all my grandchildren come and enjoy Radnor Township. I love the Radnor Trail, and I'm grateful to all the people who participated in providing that amenity resource to Radnor Township. At the time all that was going on, I was working full-time and didn't have any time to contribute to those efforts. I feel grateful to everyone who did that. I have a big concern, and I'll tell you what my concern is. First of all, I want to say again, I'm not against open space. I'm for open space. I think I voted for the 2006 referendum. I think my wife did too. like another speaker who recently spoke, I think a lot has changed since 2006. I would think that everyone in this room would have a value higher than the value of open space. And that would be the value of preserving human life itself. I believe that the stormwater problem in Radnor Township threatens human life, human safety, it threatens property. I'm going to volunteer to be the West Lancaster Avenue river keeper. Right. If we had an infinite supply of resources in this township, if we had not already spent in the past $200 million plus for benefits that we've already expended, we just haven't cashed them out, I would say, let's go for it. Let's get even more open space. But how can we seriously consider spending $10 million on open space when the cost of a child, a young adult, an older adult who might lose their life is worth more than $10 million? And I think there is a reasonable threat that the stormwater threat to our township, and I know we passed the ordinance, I was in favor of doing anything to solve that problem. I think we should start solving that problem and spend $10 million on stormwater and be in favor of supporting human life. That's the reason why we want to have open space, so humans can enjoy the open space. But they've got to be alive. They've got to be able to walk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Do we have any other public comment?
Will I be the last one then?
No, I think we
gotta-
still
gotta
have
get
Rob. Reserve time
Rob's
for
gonna come
Rob.
back. I'm going to cede my time to Rich Booker, Belrose Lane. I'm going to go back to the same question that I talked about last week, which was, how are we going to let the public actually decide this question? You know, I personally, I just wanted to tell you about, folks, I emailed 240 people on this, got 14 responses. 9 were against, 5 were for. You know, that's some good data for you to use, okay? I think what the people are saying is that things have changed. What's that? 5 were for purchase as laid out, the $12 million for 71 acres. 14, out of the 14, 9 were against the purchase. Just to give you some, if we want to have the public decide, which I think we do, and that's what you wrote, Elaine, you said the public would decide. Now, I don't believe you. I think that you're not telling the truth about that, but I think that if we want to have this, let's have the public decide. Now, let's talk about the language here so everyone understands. We are not buying Ardrossan. We're not going to preserve Ardrossan. Ardrossan will be developed. The question is, how much is the township going to pay towards that development? And I want everyone to know, I love puppies. I love apple pie in America. I love open space. Okay, but that's not what the question is. It's how much are we going to pay? The gentleman before me just talked about a serious stormwater project problem. This board told everybody in Radnor Township that we have a stormwater problem. We had $2 million that we had to raise through a new assessment, a new tax on our constituents. I don't see how we can do that and now say we're going to have a bond issue and spend $12 million to buy open space. It's misplaced. Secondly, we can't talk about this development without, in some kind of terms of 84 houses. It's not going to be 84. You have to think of it as fully developed at the 154, I think the number is. And again, it's fair one way or the other to, you can either be for this or against it, but let's get the facts straight, which is it will likely all be developed, or at least we have to consider it will be. I'm color me skeptical that we're going to have people that are going to buy it and then donate it. It could happen, but I don't think so, especially with tax rates going up, which they have been. So how are we going to let the public decide? People have talked about a referendum. If this board decides in the next 3 or 4 weeks, there's not going to be time to do a referendum. And I think my sense of it is that you've already decided, and Martin Helendrig said this before, let's not waste everybody's time if you've decided. If the question is decided, Bill and Elaine and John, if it's decided, then let's just tell the people, you're going to do this. If you want to have public input, which I think people should have, and people who are for open space and who are reasonable people can differ on this, but let's give it an opportunity. Give it, in this case, I think a vote is very appropriate. We don't have to say, well, how far are you going to extend this? We vote. No, we don't vote on everything. Let's vote, have a good public referendum on this one question. If you're as confident as you say that you are, that it's going to pass, then let's put it to a vote. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Rich.
Hi, I'll be real brief. My name's Lowell Gustafson. I live at 116 Fairfax in John's 7th Ward. I just want to say that I want to thank John for his leadership in our ward and for all of you for being so thoughtful about this topic. And I, as a member of the 7th Ward, would be very happy to pay the additional taxes to buy this. This is a great opportunity for us to gain this open space. I've benefited from land that the township owns more than 2 miles from my house over the 27 years that I've lived here. It's been to my benefit and to my children's benefit, and things have changed since 2006. The Dow is above now what it was at that point. So I think we're in good shape. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Hi, my name is Catherine Donchez, and I'm currently a resident at Haverford College, so I don't have any advanced degrees, but I am a resident of Ward 1. And I just wanted to say that although I am a resident of Ward 1, I am first and foremost, as I hope everyone here would agree, a resident of Radnor Township. And although Ardrossan is relatively far from my house, I would probably get run over walking there, but I think that I would immensely enjoy using the proposed resources that buying this land would afford. I also just wanted to point out, I think it's interesting that almost everyone who's come up here feels the need to justify that they love open space and that it is a priority for them. And I think the reason that we can all say that as Radnor residents is that we have the luxury of having a lot of open space, that we have had leadership in the past that has had the foresight for our present generation to preserve the land that we currently enjoy. And I would hope that the board and the residents of Radnor would have this foresight yet again for my generation who hopes to move here in the future. So.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Oh, we have one more.
I'm Donna Galvin. I just wanted to say we moved here about 6.5, 7 years ago, and really one of the very main reasons we moved here was the open space. It's why we paid a premium for a house, as every single person in this room, you're paying more to be in Radnor Township because of the amenities, because of the schools. But whether your kid goes to a school or not, you pay the taxes because you want to have great schools. Whether you happen to go to any of the open space that day, it is definitely an amenity for everybody. We personally go to the Willows and walk all the time. We would love it if it was longer and we could take a real hikes as opposed to you kind of get there, you wander around the curvy path that pretends to be longer than it is. So to have real open space is very important to our family. But the other thing I think is that people in this room have raised their families here and they've enjoyed those view sheds, they've enjoyed the open space. And I think we really need to think twice before we actually take it away from everybody, take it away from the younger kids that are growing up here. Because once it's gone, that's it, it's never coming back. So it's not just a question of, are we going to pay for this or are we not going to do anything? The question is, are we really going to let this be taken away from us without a fight? So, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kimberly Donches, mother of Catherine, 327 Windsor Avenue in Ward 1. And I just wanted to say that the reference to the case of beer that we were talking about earlier, this is my case of beer. The other cases that we've spent in the township are cases I did not choose or did not necessarily want to spend, and those were choices that were made for me. This is a choice that I will actually use and enjoy, and I will walk there as I'm worrying about the unfunded liabilities. This is something I can tangibly touch and feel and look forward to spending my case of beer on, as opposed to all the rest of that. So thank you.
Good evening, Philip Wilson, Wayne. One suggestion. A lot of people were trying to find some happy ground, all get in the same boat. We've said a lot of different things. One thing, I'm just sitting back there. I live on Church Road, and I live right down from Chanticleer. I participate in Chanticleer. I pay the fee. I enjoy it. I love it. It couldn't be a better thing in the world. I live on the trail. I'm on the trail every morning. You get out there at 5:30, you might stumble upon me. I love the open space, as everybody has said. Here's a proposal. Here's an idea. If we all love it so much and we don't care what it costs, how about we buy it, do it just as you propose. This is an idea. Just go with me. We buy it as proposed. We have a 30-year bond. We're paying $500,000 a year for it. We put it into the millage, wherever the hell it shows up. But then, and we've talked about this in other ways, we actually have a fee that you, as a Radnor Township resident, pay into as a member of our open space. Okay, whatever the fee may be. And it could be voluntary. And we could put it into there, but it's essentially a fund in which we could take those monies, whatever are volunteered and paid into that fund, that, let's call it our open space Radnor fund, after the fact, we've already bought the property, and it is taking away from those monies that we collect on an annual basis are then put into the services, and we're using that for the open space and the other funds that we're paying on a regular basis that are already allocated, already committed. They keep on going, but then we have an additional fund. And it also shows from all of us how much we really do love open space and how much we do think it's worth to us. So it really puts our money where their mouths, or it puts our money where our mouths are. So I'm just putting it out there as a suggestion, is essentially we have a fund or a volunteer program that we all can pitch into open space. I'll be the first to put $100 into it, whatever. I mean, we're talking about $50 a year to the average assessment, correct? I think that's the number I've seen. So I'll put in double. That's one suggestion. So that's mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? All right, Rob, you want to finish your comments?
I'm in the section that I was writing on addressing some assertions or arguments that I think I've heard that I think we need to think about a different way. Here's one of them. The Ardrossan property should fetch a higher multiple than the Foxcatcher Lissitor property for reasons that were asserted largely based on the school district. Well, the $164,000 an acre for generally sloped and floodplains, that still equals 2.4 times the Foxcatcher per acre amount. Does one really think that a 2.4 times multiple is an appropriate multiple for Radnor Township School District versus Marple Newtown? And of the current and potential future inhabitants of these Ardrossan properties, how many of those families would be actually choosing Radnor Township School District over some other private school of their liking? Next one, that I heard this argument that this board is not overpaying. And I reference the number 6 item I mentioned before about trails above. The township wants to pay $2.4 million to stop 6 homes next to Lawrence Lane cul-de-sac. I submit to you that paying $400,000 per home avoidance next to a floodplain, no less, when you could still put the trails there on the balance of the space, is a good definition and example of overpaying. Next one, that we need privacy to avoid impairing negotiations. I believe it's intellectually disingenuous for anyone to try to have this both ways. The board or no one on the board should be able to say that the campaign that accompanied the referendum centered squarely upon the purchase of Ardrossan, and also say that it eyed the purchase for many years, yet also say that it needs to do aspects temporarily closed to the public to obtain a negotiating advantage. To the contrary, the board could have used the public to help, not hurt its negotiation. Next one, that this board more than halved the price over the years. I think, no pun intended, I think that's a half-truth. If using that argument, then at least also publicly admit to halving the acreage from 141 acres to 71 acres. The current rate negotiated per acre is only 87% of the heyday in 2006's rate. Further, it is not of interest to benchmark to a previous flawed negotiation and limited appraisal in 2006. 2 wrongs do not make a right. Next one. This situation has been placed upon us now, and we must act now or risk losing it. I firmly, professionally believe that neither Eddie Scott nor his leftover land are going anywhere if Radnor Township limited its offer payment to no more than $4.5 million. Contrary to how the township positions this, I firmly believe the township is not at risk of losing this opportunity. If Eddie Scott found another buyer, even if he did, I believe he would come back to the township. The township has the most certainty of closing, and there is value in that which the township is not obtaining. Next one, our community cares about this. Well, yes, when placed in isolation. But our community also cares about items such as the Radnor Library, the Radnor ABC House, the Senior Center, the Radnor Fire Company are examples. It would be extremely interesting to ask the community directly how they would allocate $12 million among the 5 choices of these pieces of Ardrossan: the Radnor Library, the Radnor ABC House, the Senior Center, the Radnor Fire Company. It is fun to spend money. It is even more fun to spend other people's money. That is what it feels like the 7-member board could be doing. But what would all the registered voters today say today on how to allocate $12 million if given the choice? As a matter of fact, the citizens ranked 23 other local government activity expenditures higher than open space. That was only 3 years ago in the 2010 CBFAC report shown on page 9. That was after the Great Recession had ended. Context does matter. Next one, this is the this is my last one. It's the Green Space Alliance report. You've heard me say it before. Consider how that report, who made it. It didn't analyze the costs associated with acquiring the open space. It was produced for, I won't repeat it because I already said it. I'll move on to the next one. Next bucket, items which have changed in the 7 years since November of 2006, at that debt funding referendum. The board has increased our taxes and fees to a residential taxpayer 29.4% since 2009 on the average household. The board and township have learned of real contractual, enormous unfunded liabilities of $236 million. The board and township have learned of real, past deferred, yet still unsaved for stormwater capital expenditures of at least $10 million. The Great Recession has happened. We've also had taxpayer/voter turnover. Citizens move in and citizens move out. And taxpayers' heads and hearts. The citizens assess their situation in 2006 and assess it now in 2013. Our personal perspectives and wherewithal very well could have changed significantly. And then lastly, the report 2 weeks ago in the paper that approximately 500 less Radnor public school students in the next 10 years. Those are significant items that have changed in the last 7 years. Now, real examples of what worry me. Commissioner Spengler's campaign letter dated August 14th, 2 months in advance, stating that 4 commissioners to vote yes for Ardrossan in October. Commissioner Schaefer's email on October 27th, encouraging folks to come to the October 28th meeting, and it stated, it might be helpful to have a few supportive voices in the board audience. It seems that this was referring to our RRG group is rallying themselves to come to the meeting and agitate. There was an email that Commissioner Curley sent to people in his ward that not all commissioners are included or involved, and it seems a subset of commissioners is negotiating outside of executive session. These are things that worry me. Commissioner Jim Higgins having an email falsely telling a constituent of his that I recommended selling nearly all the township's real estate. At the October 28th board meeting, I'll stop that one, okay. The appraiser being influenced by the developer seller. So far, all the documents have been provided by the seller to the appraiser. No documents from the buyer that I'm aware of have gone from us to the appraiser. For example, these 2 items, there was a land development concept plan for Tract B, the quarry tract, drawn by the seller's civil engineer, dated February 20th, 2013. That plan showed development potential for 8 lots clustered along a cul-de-sac street on Tract B. Then another document provided was a yield summary portion of a development plan prepared by the seller civil and dated January 24th, 2007, showing a maximum permitted density of 180 units on the 352-acre larger parcel. The concern I have there is that if the value of the per acre value that his appraisal in March, this past March, was driven by the ability to build 180 units, the seller has subsequently submitted plans to the township showing a maximum calculation of only 154 units, not 180. That would reduce the value of the property. If that reduction of 154 over 180 is linear, that's $665,000 left on the table accidentally because we are not watching the seller influence the appraiser. Another item that worries me is the purchase agreement appears not to have drafted a mechanism to adjust the price based on our own buyer due diligence findings. So for example, what happens when we do a geotech report on the quarry tract, and if that geotech report shows that no houses can be done instead of the seller's concept plan showing that 8 can be done. If that geotech report shows that 0 houses can be built feasibly, or it shows it would take an enormous expenditure to correct those grounds to build the houses, we could be overpaying noticeably. How do we reduce the price for the fact that the appraiser calculated the main tract value incorporating a seller calculation of those 180 units when it's now the seller's calculating only 154 units? Same type of geotech question for the Wheeler tract. What happens when we do a geotech report on the Wheeler tract, and if it shows that no houses instead of 6 can be built feasibly there next to that floodplain? Or if it takes a lot of expenditure in order to correct those situations, to build those houses. The other thing that worries me is a week ago, October 16th, CARFAC meeting minutes clearly approved a motion recommending to the board that the board conducts a simultaneous independent appraisal. It was 5 yeses and 0 noes and 1 abstention. But then last week, Commissioner Nagle had mentioned something about explaining to CARFAC why that's not needed. I worry about that intervention. Now, 2 last buckets. The resolution of in earlier this year, I think it's called 2013-07. It was on January 28th of this current calendar year, and regarding the purchase agreement and prudent documents and procedures. These are just rhetorical questions that I hope do occur. Will the township, in fact, order a brand new Phase 1 environmental report? Will the township, in fact, order a brand new geotech soils report? Will the township, in fact, order a brand new and thorough ALTA survey with the township's resolutions Phase 2, minimum outline documented scope? Will the township, in fact, order the new title commitment? Then, after all those items come in, will the township hire a fresh new appraiser and provide all those materials to that new appraiser and obtain a new unadulterated appraisal? Let's please not keep recycling the gentleman retained in 2006 by Natural Lands Trust. Lastly, will the township present a pro forma budget showing approximately $600,000 a year worth of direct trade-off expenditure cuts, clearly showing what would be proposed to be cut? Not saying we necessarily would cut it, but what would the trade-offs be? What would we cut if we are going to take on $600,000 a year of direct debt service schedule for this proposed purchase? To be clear, I'm not saying we necessarily must cut the $600,000, but it is an appropriate lens to use when evaluating a new $600,000 a year expenditure, rather than simply operating under a belief that money is infinite. Concluding, I do see tremendous value in open space. That said, I do not see appropriate value in the price and terms at which the board majority wants to pay for these particular pieces of the developer's open space, which he wants to sell to the township. The right thing to do is to finish the township's own 1991 recommendation by putting this specific major acquisition, now that you have identified specific pieces of property, characteristics, and price, put it to a voter referendum this May. I ask the board to vote yes for that. If that board does not allow that, then I encourage the citizens or a subset of the citizens to make a referendum happen if that is what they want. I believe Einstein once said, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. I hope this comment tonight counts.
Thank you, Rob. Can you make it quick? Can you make it quick?
Doug McKeown again. He made a perfect point. Not everything that can be counted counts, okay? Not just because you put numbers to everything means that it's not, what you come up with in numbers matters. This is a kind of a thing which, as he says, just because, you have to do all these steps and all this kind of stuff in order to make sure that everything's right. And he honestly believes, I think incorrectly, that this land will somehow not be lost to the township, to the public as a community. There is a great amount of open space in this township that is privately held, And that is not actually open to people. This would be public open space. I'm a very strong advocate of public open space, and this is, I think, something that we need to do. With all due respect to all of the jargon, all the time numbers and so forth, and I'm perfectly happy to look at all of it. If you put it on the website or send a copy of it to me, I'd be delighted to. I think the fundamental issue here is, what is the character of the community and the specific environment in which we live? And how are we going to preserve? Do we need to preserve that for the future, our children, our grandchildren, or whoever moves into the community, or not? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug.
Can I make a brief comment? I just want to clarify, a lot of questions of referendum statements of referendum have come up tonight. Obviously, the Board of Commissioners has the right to initiate a referendum, but so do the electors. I just wanted to point out the sections. I'm not going to read all this. Section 804 is the initiative and referendum powers, and I just want to mention that it has provisions that, for instance, if the public were to decide to do a referendum without our assistance, and they were to file this within 30 days of the enactment of the ordinance, that ordinance would be suspended until the election, special election. And then, of course, the public has the right, if the public decides that this board is not doing what's in their best interest, the public has that ability to actually overturn an ordinance by, one, filing the petition, and two, having the referendum question. And if the majority of the voters vote against the ordinance would be rescinded. Now, this is probably giving John heartache, but this is a provision in our code. And John Rice, I may have misstated, I hope not, but the provisions are pretty broad. It just speaks in terms of ordinance. So I just want to make sure that the public knows that they do have recourse, even if they don't feel that the board has done, what's in their best interest. But so there is option there by the public.
Okay, I think that's it for public comment. We have one more. Can you keep this to 1 minute?
If I may retort, there is recourse, yes, but I believe that the publicization has led to extreme apathy on anyone with comments to the nay.
Okay, so this was the end of our, one more.
Hi, Laura Luker, Radnor Redison from Ward 3. Mostly what I want to talk about is the referendum. And I am really concerned that if there is a referendum and we have to wait until a certain time frame, are the parties who are wanting to sell everything willing to wait that long? I'm scared of that part. So I just want people to kind of consider what has been done. We voted for this many years ago. I know it was a different time, but we all voted on that specific thought of open space in Radnor, specifically Ardrossan. So I am all for the open space. I'm all for having that a continuous open space trail on both sides of the creek. Ecologically, it is so important for everybody to have this. And I also think for our own health, it's a great place to be. I will drive anywhere to go for a walk, to be outside. I drive out of our township to go and walk to various places. I will go to, 5 miles, 10 miles to do that. So I don't think it's really anything other than 1 mile value. I think it's a lot more than that. So, but most of all, I think the people of town have voted already, and we should stay with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, I think you've already spoken for 35 minutes.
Well, that's fair. I just wanted to clear something up that I think.
Yeah, but this is not a rebuttal.
This gentleman over here rebutted to me, and he referenced me too in a third person. It was kind of like.
You've got 30 minutes already on the clock.
The purchase agreement already, I think it's the seller who wants to wait till January 15 at the earliest to close. So there's no risk. The seller can walk away anyway if he doesn't the referendum would not change whether or not the seller comes to the table to finish the agreement or not.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, that is it for public comment. That is the end of our second evening of comment on this issue. I'm so far really pleased at the turnout. We've had both nights, we've had a full house of about 80 people to come and talk about this. And I think this is what we were looking for. We were looking for our community to come out and tell us how they feel. And I personally feel good that we've had our community come out and tell us how they feel. I'm sure my colleagues are also experiencing the number of emails that I'm getting and phone calls about this. So I am completely comfortable with this process of us hearing from our community. We put everything out there, and we are getting feedback from our community, and we've had some great arguments on both sides. And we will continue to hear from you. So if you're watching this at home and tonight's comments have given you some thoughts you'd like to share, please do. Come to the next hearing, email us, call us, participate. Now, on to the next hearing. We are currently scheduled to meet again Tuesday evening, the 26th. That's next Tuesday, 2 days before Thanksgiving. And I would like to put to this board how you are feeling, if you think that is necessary, bearing in mind that we will be meeting again on this issue only on December 9th. And at that meeting, we will have in hand our staff analysis, the Phase 2 analysis from our open space acquisition policy. So do I have any comments on whether you feel next week is necessary and useful? Or would you?
I don't see any benefit next week. I do think that once we have the Phase 2 in front of us, we can have a much more meaningful discussion.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yes, I feel the same way.
I'm on vacation.
You're not here anyway. Kevin and John, do you have any?
If there's no new information, and given the proximity of the date to Thanksgiving with many people traveling,
Right. Okay.
I don't know that we're going to have any new comments and any new valuable
Okay.
information.
So, John Rice, do you think I need to get a motion and a vote for that, or do we just?
Well, you need a motion to cancel it. I think
Okay.
you've already scheduled it, so just a motion to cancel it.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Make
for
a
that?
motion to cancel the meeting on the 26th.
26th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any other commissioner comment or staff comment or public
Madam,
comment?
Madam President, I
Yes.
do. I think based on, I know it's going to be contradictory to the board, but I think based on the value of this, based on the schedule's been set, I would recommend that you still hold it. At least there's an opportunity where somebody comes. I know you probably don't want to spend another evening, but I think you scheduled it. I think the public knows, and I think you should keep it based on the magnitude of the purchase.
So if it's the only thing on the agenda, and a very few new residents come out, the meeting should be short. I don't think we need to
The
hear.
meetings are never short if we don't have rules,
No,
though.
I know, but we've heard from several people several times.
Right.
And it's not new information. I've taken notes. I don't need to
Right.
hear it again. So, but I would support having another meeting, having the meeting on Tuesday, to Bob's point, that, we promised the community we would do this. But I do ask that it's a very short meeting. Maybe we set a time definite, no more than 1 hour, something to that effect.
Any other thoughts?
If you hold it, I can come. If it's at a reasonable hour, not at 5
Yeah.
o'clock.
Do we have any public comment on that?
I would vote for another meeting.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That was Tom Lowy, if anybody wants to know what that voice was. All right. Well, then I'll go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, which was to cancel, say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, nay. Did you vote?
I'm going to be here, so I'm not voting. I'm going to be on vacation.
Can't do
So
that.
it's 3-2. And it fails 2-3. All right, so we will hold another meeting on the 26th.
But don't we need the majority of those present to pass or fail? Or
No.
No.
only to pass?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will have
Okay.
another meeting on the 26th. I believe it was called for 6 o'clock, 6:30. And we'll try and keep it to 2 hours or less, and we will try to do a lot better with the soft 5-minute rule. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, okay, sure. You guys, I forgot public comment.
Public participation, thank you. The sidewalk project on Shimoni, again, like to appeal to the board, would like to have it canceled. We'd like to stop the work. It has already resulted in at least one heritage tree being removed because they damaged the roots. It's going to result in more trees being damaged. And also, we've had word of abusive language from the contractor to the constituents. We really feel, it's not hearsay, it's a direct testimony. So what I would say is we really need to stop that construction and really rethink the whole project, because you're going to ruin more people's property, more people, more trees. You're antithetical to what your stated purposes are.
Thank you, Rich.
And this really will be short. I live on Cornwall Lane. My name is Mimi Auchincloss. That project is a tremendous inconvenience. I was opposed to it, but it really throws salt in the wound that they staged. I called the township, and they did try to straighten it out. They staged the big equipment, the big pipes on Cornwall Lane. The road's been closed a couple of times. And Friday, the contractor cut the water line so that nobody had any water through. I don't know the exact time, but it was off when I came back. I went out, and when I finally came back, it was back on. But it's an inconvenience. The road appears to have been narrowed. I know they say it. I called Higgins. He's Jim Higgins. He said it was only a few inches, but it's really inconvenient, and I would greatly appreciate the township riding that contractor. It's a huge project. They're digging way down, like Rick said about the AIDS tree got taken down. They marred their fence. I'm told they're swerving it out a little to avoid the Randolph's fence, but it's hard even for those of us who aren't right there. So I would appreciate, with regard to the ongoing construction, that you do what you can to make it more pleasant for the neighbors.
Bob, what are you doing?
Thank you.
I'm asking Bob, what are we doing?
The one inspector that was on the job was removed immediately this morning when I heard the comment that there was some feedback to residents. They were immediately removed.
Is he part of the contractor, or was it one of our people?
He was part of the inspection company, and he was removed immediately.
A third party, he's not?
That's correct.
Okay.
They were removed and replaced. Steve Norsini and I were out for about 2.5 hours on Saturday morning looking at that to see what other options may be available. We spoke to some of the residents within that area. So Steve and I are working on to see what other options are available there within that particular impact area as part of this. So, but we'll continue to keep everyone advised as part of that. I know Steve's on that. I know Steve's gotten the front line of a lot of things, but we'll be on that. I know we actually were at Cornwall there and actually saw some of the issues there. So again, we'll be constantly working with the contractor on that.
Are you going to be watching him? Because I assume, I didn't get a chance to check email today. I assume he absorbs the financial loss.
Absolutely.
So you need to make sure he's not cutting corners to.
Absolutely not. There will be no corners cut on that particular project there, so we'll be on that.
Thank you, Bob.
Sure.
Any other public comment? Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Second. We're adjourned.